even though sometimes it can be a little bit cryptic, it's almost like a bit of therapy. And if I couldn't do that, regardless of whether people see it or not, I think I'd go a bit mad. So yeah, I just need I need to sort of like get it all out of me, sort of thing.
Welcome to the Flowing Fruit Bowl, a platform dedicated to the discussion and exploration of art and the creative process. I'm the host and creator, ONS, and for this week's episode, I had a conversation with the amazing artist, Mr Frivolous. Based in London, England, Mr Frivolous is a fine artist whose work hovers somewhere between fashion illustration and street art. With a strong focus on portraiture, Mr Frivolous's work is visually striking and beautifully busy. So I'll start where I start with everybody else, and that's just tell us a bit about yourself and how you became an artist.
Right. Well, I'm Mr. Frivolous. How I became an artist, I think it's just the usual story. Like most other artists who say when they were young, they started drawing from then. I did exactly the same thing. Always used felt tip pens, just the basic stuff. Not much of a painter or anything like that. The name Mr. Frivolous. I know that's not the question you asked me, but I was never meant to be Mr. Frivolous. I didn't know what name to use. I used to be an MC, also I thought my name was MC Frivolous back in the day of So Solid and stuff like that. I thought, oh my gosh, they're from my area. I'm gonna be an MC. I was crap at it. So I thought, you know what, I'm better at art. Let me just change the MC to Mr. So Mr. Frivolous stayed. And Mr. MC Frivolous didn't. So that's it.
That's kind of cool. And also, So Solid is funny as you mentioned, because I'm a huge garage fan because I'm a 90s baby. So it's really
nice.
funny because I'm like, I love it when I'm talking to a lot of my friends don't know who people like So Solid are, because particularly a lot of people from
Right.
America, they have no idea what garage is. And I was trying to
Yeah.
explain, actually yesterday I was trying to explain garage music to somebody from America. And I was like, I
Oh,
can't really
right.
explain it because the whole UK scene. So I was like,
Yeah.
so that's really cool. That's so interesting. And there's such a link between music and art because a lot of artists I know either participate in music or they have participated in music. And like, why do you think that, or do you think that there is any kind of link between music and art?
I don't know. They're both very creative. Maybe obviously one is visual, one is just it's not just sound, but it is sound. But to be honest, if I wasn't an artist, I definitely think I would have delved in something music wise, whether it be a failed MC or actually just making melodies or music. Because before even all of this, I thought I was a R&B singer. I was in a group
Yeah.
way back in the day. I was sort of contemplating being in a sort of indie group by myself. That never sort of happened. So yeah, I love music. Like the way
Yeah.
it affects my work is just like it's very impactful. Put it that way. I
Mm.
sometimes I love it so much. I have to just switch it off because it can really have an emotional
No,
sort of tone.
that's pretty
So
interesting.
yeah,
That's super cool. And I think that's really cool just generally because it's like, it's, as you said, it's like a different creative outlet. And it's like maybe the things you're not getting from art, you can get from music or the vice versa,
yeah,
because I think music affects
yeah,
people very differently to art. Art's very visual, but music catches people's emotions and feelings in a completely different way.
yeah.
And it's weird because like you kind of almost want your art to do what music can do for people, but you kind of
That would
can't
be
because they're two
amazing.
different things, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. I actually wish I could make art that could make sort of people could hum, but you can't do that visually. I mean, maybe someone else can, but I do
Mm.
sort of admire musicians and people who sort of make music from thin air, just like how they hear sounds and how they hear a melody and sort of give it to us. I think that's incredible. If I could do something like that, oh, that would be amazing. But yeah.
So why is art important to you?
Oh, you're coming with the questions today, boy. Why, why is art important to me? I think it's important because it's just the best way that I can express myself. I'm not very good at talking to people. I'm okay. It depends who it is, where I'm at, but generally, that's the most confident place I can be, just sort of like creating the work that I do. Um, it's the most revealing. Like I'm not very good at expressing myself or expressing my feelings or opening up as I would be or as I am in the art. Mr. Frivolous stuff, the written stuff, the portraits that I
Mm.
do, even though sometimes it can be a little bit cryptic, it's almost like a bit of therapy. And if I couldn't do that, regardless of whether people see it or not, I think I'd go a bit mad.
Mm.
So yeah, I just need I need to sort of like get it all out of me, sort of thing.
It's almost like a release. It's like the way you process like your emotions and your thoughts and your feelings. Like that's the way you do
Yeah,
it through
yeah,
art. Like
that's it.
so actually I wanted to ask you about the whole idea of Mr. Frivolous and the idea of, having like an alias and kind of working under a different name. Like
Yeah,
do you think that by working under a different name gives you the kind of space to make more honest work?
I think so, I do think so. Um, yeah, I guess if people don't know who you are, you could sort of like you don't have to worry about people sort of judging you or opinions or anything like that. Obviously, now I'm trying to change things up a little bit and try and show myself
Hmm.
a lot more than, well, not a lot more, just taking baby steps and sort of like exposing myself a little bit. But there is a quietness to sort of having an alias and not many people not well, how do I say this? Not having many people know who you are.
Hmm.
So it's just like, yeah, I do find that quite comforting.
Because I find it really interesting. It's something that has long fascinated me, and I talked to it with a few different artist friends I have who have aliases, and it's kind of like an interesting separation between you as a person and you as the artist, and like you
Mm,
had that really nice divide where like you can
yeah, yeah,
shut off doing one thing or you can shut off doing the other. Whereas in a lot of us have are like so kind of tied together, like our names so tied with our work and our personal lives that it's hard to
yeah,
separate the two. And I'm always a little bit envious, actually. I think when people have aliases, 'cause I'm just like, oh, not that you have it easy, but like, well, if you have it easy and you have it hard. So you have it easy because it means you can kind of like, okay, I'm going to be Mr. Frivolous today. I'm going to be, this other person today. You can
yeah,
choose.
yeah,
But then
yeah.
again, I think, do you find that it kind of helps you when it comes to like approaching, like galleries, approaching opportunities? Because it's like, you have to fill out your personal information and it's hard to kind of sometimes explain why you have an alias or why you work under a different name.
Okay, so I mean, there's actually quite a number of reasons why I decided to use an alias, like the whole Mr. Frivolous sort of thing.
Hmm.
I do definitely find it it useful when it comes to writing to galleries. I mean, I don't have many sort of gallery stuff, but
Yeah.
I have found it quite useful, or speaking to potential clients or customers or whatever. But I also treat the name. It's like, for example, I'm of African descent, and my last name is quite long. So
Hmm.
it's I'm not going to say what it is, not
Of
because I'm
course.
ashamed of it or anything like that, but it's quite a long name, and when you read it, and you could see, okay, he's from Africa.
Yeah.
There's been this whole thing about sending out CVs. Being someone who's from an ethnic minority, black, when you send out CVs, you don't know whether you're going to get a reply back or a response from the employer based on your name.
Hmm.
So I realized having the name Mr. Frivolous sort of, as mad as it sounds, it sort of worked to my advantage because nobody
Yeah.
knows where I'm from. Nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows much about me. It's a bit of a mystery, and it maybe that's a plus for me. Not to say that I'm ashamed to use my real name or anything like that,
Yeah.
but I
No, I
just thought,
understand.
okay, yeah, yeah. So I just
Yeah,
thought,
no, I get that. I absolutely get
yeah,
that. And actually, a good example of that would be something like Jamie Foxx, because like he chose a stage name because
yeah,
he
yeah,
chose the name
exactly.
Jamie because it was a male and a female name, so that people didn't know who it was when they had the roster of the comedy.
Yeah,
So the
exactly.
idea of
Yeah,
like you don't know what to expect, and you're not having any kind of pretenses when you go into a conversation or any kind of
exactly.
dialogue. And actually, it's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
finished to say that because I was very much like, what do I refer to you as, Mr. Frivolous? Which is why my message is like, oh, howdy, Mr. or howdy, Mr. Frivolous. I was like, I don't know if he's going to get annoyed by me saying this, but it's just funny.
You can call me free,
Um,
Mr. Frivolous, whatever's in your heart. I honestly don't mind.
so, did you study art or are you self-taught?
Both. Self-taught. Like, no one really actually taught me how to sort of be an artist or anything like that. But I did go to art school.
Hmm.
So I went to Camberwell College of Art for 1 year, did the foundation there. Then I went and did a degree at LCP, London College of Printing, which I think is now called London College of Communication, so LCC.
Oh,
Um, yeah, I think the University of Arts. I don't know what they call themselves now, but like it had Central St Martin's, LCP or LCC, London College of Fashion, Camberwell, and I think they've got Wimbledon School of Arts now or something like that. But yeah, that was a long time ago. A long time ago. Didn't learn anything. Got crap with my grades, but it was fun.
but I think no. I think the interesting thing. I think sometimes like education Sometimes, not all the time, because I know people who love education will listen to this. But I think sometimes education is about the experience, not necessarily the actual result of what you get.
Yeah,
Because your experiences in education is what led you to do what you do now.
that's
You know,
true.
and had you had like quote unquote a better experience or a worse experience, you may not be doing what you do now.
Very true. Yeah, that's a
So
good point. Yeah.
I don't know. I think because like I have a degree in photography, which is very interesting. But like when I
Yeah,
told people,
I heard this. Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
yeah, no, yeah. So, but when I told people about it, and everyone's like, "Well, why don't you do photography then?" It's like it doesn't work out that way. Just because you do educate, just because you learn something, doesn't mean you'll get a job in that. Like
True.
I'm very happy that my life at the minute, like I have a full-time job just in retail. Is it the best job ever?
Okay.
No. But does it pay the bills? Absolutely. Am I happy?
Mm,
Absolutely. You know, like I think
that's good.
just because you may do something when you're younger, doesn't mean that you're going to do
Mm,
the same thing when you're older. And I think, that's not something that we all need to remember. Because I feel like we
that's true.
forget it very much, very quickly. Like, right, okay, so what are your thoughts on art education? And is it important for an artist to have a degree?
No, I don't think it is important, especially in the day and age that we are in now. Not to sound like an old man or anything like that,
Yeah.
but with with social media, having your own website, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, you don't. I don't think you really need an art degree. But like you were saying about the experience, I I would sort of advise it in a way, but I don't know. I don't like the whole debt, the whole like having
Oh,
to
yeah.
pay,
Yeah.
yeah, the whole loan thing. That's I'm not into that. But apart from that, you'll end up, well, most people like myself have ended up meeting amazing people, um, had amazing experiences, um, growth, learned a lot. Like I came across so many amazing artists, like from all over the world, and the influence they had on me, yeah, they definitely influenced me. Definitely.
Yeah. So, what's the biggest challenge of being an artist?
Rent. No, I'm joking. The biggest challenge of being an artist.
To be fair, that's actually
Oh,
not a joke because that is also quite true.
you know exactly. Yeah, I was partially like being honest. For me at the moment, I think it's time because when you're an artist, that's all you want to do.
Hmm.
But realistically, you can't. I mean, well, for some artists, I'm sure there are quite a few artists out there who could just art every day, all day, pay for rent, and they're perfectly fine. But I'm not that artist. Like I had to sort of like make time for friends, which I rarely do, which is bad. I need to sort that out. Obviously, make time for my missus, make
Yeah.
time for myself, go to work, shower, eat, all of that good stuff. But then I had to sort of like try to carve time to create art now. But by the time I get there, it's just like I'm so exhausted sometimes.
Hmm.
It's like I have to sort of, I can't wait for inspiration. I have to sort of make myself work. So juggling time for someone like me, because I'm not very good at time management. I think that's the sort of like big challenge for me at the moment.
So I think that's really interesting because every artist I ever meet, whether that's in person or
Mm.
that I kind of speak to on the podcast, especially, is that's the question I always ask everybody. And everybody's answers are
Okay.
always very, very different.
Okay.
Because everyone says, but I think time is one of the biggest factors because, as you said, like you want to be making art, which is kind of crazy when you think about there are people like Damien Hirst who don't even make their own art anymore. And it's like they've got to a point in which they don't even make it themselves. They have teams to make it themselves. And it's weird how that we have so many artists out there, like millions of artists out there, probably even billions, who just want to
Mm.
create art. It's kind of insane, like how unlevel the playing field kind of is.
Mm.
I don't know. It's kind of sad, I think. But I think, yeah, time especially. I think time for anything is hard
Yeah,
when you're
that's
an
true.
adult. I think when you have like, when you have a job, when you have a
Mm.
family, when you have other commitments, and then you have, oh, I want to also do this, you know,
Mm.
it can be very hard. But I think time management is very important. I would definitely advise you, just as an aside, to get on top of that if you can, because the sooner that you
Yeah,
manage your time, the better it is. What kind of different hats do you have to wear as an artist? Because obviously creating the art is actually only just a small part of actually being an artist.
I took that so little. I was thinking about, do I have hats?
But you're not the
What?
only person who's done that.
It's just mostly, you know what? It's I usually have a piece of paper in front of me, and the aim is always just to fill it out.
Hmm.
If it's not that, then I'll check my emails.
Hmm.
If it's not that, I'm always on social media, and I'm not necessarily just posting, but I'm quite visual. Like I just absorb visuals all the time, and so I'm looking at other people's work and how I can sort of like how I can inspire mine and how I can improve on mine and how people sort of like promote their work. And I'm always doing stuff like that. then I try to jump off, listen to podcasts. I try to figure out what else I could do as a creative. Like I'm not like I've got the whole like clothing sort of thing for Philip
Of course,
Ninjas
yeah.
and trying to work out am I a graphic designer again or do I am I gonna I mean, there's lots of things that come through my head. I'm probably not even answering your question, but
That's
there's
fine.
loads of things come through my head. Um, but my brain is very scattered. So yeah, these hats, I probably got like the cheapest hats ever. I don't know.
I think so. I think it's really nice to see how like you're very inspired by just being creative. Like I love the fact you're thinking like, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? I think that's really cool to see somebody being like very like just inspired by everything, not just being like, oh, I only want to do this. Like that's really interesting because
Yeah,
like you do have a clothing line and you do have like other blogs and you have other visual kind of media, other outlets. Sure,
yeah,
definitely get
yeah.
into later. But like, I find that very
Okay.
interesting because I'm always kind of curious, like why I guess like why, but also not just really why, but more just kind of the idea of like, how do you stop all that noise? Because that's a lot to be thinking about all at once, you know? And at the end of the day, like
Yeah.
ultimately you have to choose one direction. You can't do everything.
No, that's true. That is true. The thing has been okay. So before I had like the other sort of names that I mentioned, I was three different artists. I was Mr.
Oh,
Frivolous. I was a stencil artist called Snuggles. Then I was also who was I? For Philip Ninjas. For Philip Ninjas has been many different things. Now it's a clothing brand. It was supposed to be a clothing brand in the beginning, but now it actually is a clothing brand. So I was doing all of these things because being just the one Mr. Frivolous, the sole artist, was sometimes it was just too much. It was a lot. Like
hmm.
I mean, not to say I didn't enjoy doing it, but it's just like I needed a break. So
Hmm.
I thought,
Oh,
let me
okay.
just go and do something else creative. But then I got fed up with the other two, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to stick to being Mr. Frivolous. And now for Philip Ninjas is back. It's like, oh, what am I doing?
Like, but I think that's a good idea. Like the idea of like if you're kind of feeling bored in a certain like situation with your work, like then just do something else. Do something completely
Yeah,
different that takes you away from that. And that way it'll give
yeah,
you a different
definitely.
perspective when you come back to
But at the same time, it gives me more headache.
it.
It's just like, just you know what I probably need to do is just focus on the whole creative sort of thing that I do, and maybe just take a break and do something that's non-creative, even if it's just watching TV or because sometimes taking a break from what you love makes you love it even more, if that makes
Oh
sense.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But I struggle to do that. Like I'm just 24/7 Mr. Frivolous.
So I have a work colleague, and he's a really, 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 really amazing guy. We spoke ages ago, and he
Mm.
said something to me that's really, really actually changed my mindset, which is really interesting. He was like, "There's
Okay.
always seasons for things." So like right now, you could be like in your working season where you work on loads of work at once, and then you'll be have a
Mm.
resting season. So think about stuff like that. Like there's always seasons for things, and you should always ask yourself, which he said to me was like, you should always ask yourself if it's the right time to do something now. So every time I do something, it's a really good advice. It's really actually changed the way I think about things, which is weird. But every time I do something, I'm like, is this the right time to do it? And then it's like either yes or no. If the answer is yes, then do it. If the answer is no, then do something else. So it's the idea of like asking yourself, like, is this what you want to be doing right now? Because
Mm.
there are plenty of other things you could be doing. If that makes sense.
That doesn't make sense. That's me asking myself questions is a no go for me. I don't even know how to answer the questions you're asking me. So I struggle a lot. My brain is a weird place, very weird place.
I think personally, I think here I go again with the advice. I think that you just
Yeah.
need to just sit down and write down everything. I stand here go writing again. Sit down and write down everything you do and everything you want to
Okay.
do and everything you want to accomplish. And that will give yourself you can see it on paper in front of you, and this you can ask yourself and say to yourself, what's realistic, what's not realistic, what have we got
Mm.
time for, what don't I have time for, what needs
Yeah.
to happen with this, what needs to happen with this. Where do you want Mr. Frivolous to go? Where do you want your clothing brand to go? You know,
Okay.
what else do you want to do? If you want to do graphic design, like when are you going to fit that into your schedule? Where do you have the time?
Mm.
How's it going to manifest in everything else you do? That kind of
Mm.
thing. Like just a bit of just take like a week out to sit down and just organize your thoughts. That's what I feel like you might need.
Right. Okay. A
Maybe.
week.
Maybe you don't need that at all. Maybe you don't. But I'm just saying
Okay.
that's what I would suggest. Just
Okay.
spending some time organizing your thoughts. Because that way you'll come back to everything with like going like, okay, so I want to do X, Y, and Z with the clothing line. I want to do X, Y, and Z
Yeah.
with Mr. Frivolous. And then all you do is reverse engineer how you get there. That way you're like, okay, cool, I can do this, I can do that. I need to do this, I need to do that. Yeah,
I
so
need to Google. Carry on.
No, but like, so when you know what you need to do, you could then spend the time doing it, and you won't be distracted by like watching films or being on Netflix or scrolling through Instagram. You'll be like, cool, I've got a mission, I've got something I want to
Mm.
achieve, I'm going to go and do that, and then you go and do it. Which sounds very
Okay.
simple in actuality, but it's actually not. It's quite hard.
Right. I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna give it a try.
I mean, you might as well, but if it goes wrong, please don't blame me. Right. So, do you create art full time?
Oh no, no. Um, After work, if I'm lucky, on the weekends, if I'm lucky, whenever I can, there is a whenever I can find spare time, I will create work. But not full time yet. I'm planning on doing that, and I did. Yeah, I'm definitely planning on doing that. I had done that a little bit in the past. It didn't last too long because the money ran out. So no, not yet.
So, I find this really fascinating, like extremely fascinating, because I talk to a span of different artists, and a lot of them are part time, wanting to be full time, or they're like
Mm,
full time, always, having been creating art for like decades.
mm.
And I'm kind of just curious, like, how do you balance creating art and working? Because it's damn hard.
It is one of the most. It is the most difficult thing. Like it drives me nuts because, like I said about time, when you know your time is limited. I mean, yeah, when you know your time is limited, then you know you have to do other stuff just to survive, and you know what your passion is, and it's art. But you know you can't do that full time yet. It sort of just drives me a little bit mad. Like
Hmm.
I almost sort of become unresponsive. Not to say that I don't stop talking to people, but it's just
Yeah.
constantly on my head. It's just like I want everyone to disappear so that I can do some work. But being in the situation that I am in now, the whole conversation we had about planning, that's one thing I need to sort out. And I
Hmm.
think once I get there, I can make my life more as a part-time wise, full-time wise, whatever, as my life as an artist a little bit more easier.
Hmm.
But it's just me. I just need to focus on planning. Yeah. But it's quite difficult though.
Because I always think like one thing I say to a lot of artists is that
Mm.
if you're not creating art full time, enjoy that, because when you do create art full time, you're still going to be doing the same amount as art as you do now. It would just be all your other time is actually just going to be admin and marketing and trying to
Yeah.
find connections and trying to make connections and trying to you
Yeah.
know send work to galleries and take work to places. And it's like
Mm.
it's not that you necessarily are going to create more art by being a full time artist. It's
Mm.
actually just like you take on more jobs. And in fact, one could argue being a full time artist is almost like having two full time jobs, because one side is art and the other side is the business. So
That's
I feel
true.
like I feel like everybody wants to be a full time artist, but I don't think everybody is. I also actually don't think everybody's cut out to be a full time artist. I think
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong with having a part time job and creating art on the side, and that still being a good source of income for you. I think there's nothing wrong
Yeah.
with that. And
Yeah,
I don't know about
definitely.
you, but I feel like there's a lot of stigma around that in terms of like people are like, oh, you're not a proper artist if you don't do it full time. Like, have you ever come across that?
I came across that with myself.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, guess so. Yeah, Southwell, I guess,
yeah,
of course.
definitely. I think for obviously coming from art school,
Mm,
not doing like work experiences or anything like that. I used to work in retail as well. It was fun, like for a while. But then coming out of art school, I thought, oh, I'm gonna be this artist. I'm gonna be working full time, and I'm gonna take over the world. And I had that for such a long time, and I think I was starting to get some. I was literally getting anxiety and depression
mm,
because what I thought would happen wasn't. So I sort of, for whatever reason, I started to see myself as a bit of a failure. Like
mm.
I wasn't able to do what I wanted because I come out of this little bubble and sort of come into reality. So it took me a little while to understand that, you know what, this doesn't mean that you're a failed artist. This is this is just how life is. Like there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with it. You can, have the job that you have and sort of like create on the side, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But yeah, I never really got any sort of like stigma from anybody else. It was always from myself. Like
Oh,
yeah,
but I think that's probably the worst though, because
yeah,
it's hard. Like you can be extreme. Like no one's going to be as worst a critic as you are to yourself. Like
mm,
on
yeah,
anything you
definitely,
do, like no one can tear your work apart
mm,
the way you can tear your work apart as a person creating it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think it's kind of like that's kind of like how did you shift that mindset though?
I think I just eventually just embraced the change, and I think also what I was doing was asking. a lot of other artists about, how they sort of find time to do work and while they have families and, and most of the responses I was getting is that they were making time.
Yeah.
Like this is where the whole organizing and planning comes in. They were sort of making that effort to make time to create their works whilst doing the other stuff. So it started to sort of make sense like, oh, wait, that's quite normal. So what am I panicking for? Why am I stressing myself out? So yeah, that's sort of like how I calmed down eventually.
It's like quite a premature question, and we'll go back to social media in a bit. But do you feel like social media puts pressure on people to be a full-time artist, or to make it seem like people are full-time artists? Because it looks like everybody is, but not everybody actually is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think so. Social media now, from what it was before,
Yeah.
at least let's just say I'm showing my way back in the days of MySpace and Flickr.
Yeah.
You could create art. Yeah.
Flickr was great though. Flickr, we needed the Flickr.
Oh, it's still around, but
yeah, but we need something in the same sphere where people are going to actually want to, like, everything. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. Continue.
But no, that's I would love that whole sort of a new sort of Flickr world where it's just like, well, anyway, but yeah,
people like where people just sorry. I know I said I'm not going to interrupt you completely.
No, it's all right.
I think just like a space where people can actually feel passionate about posting their work and creating, where it's just not attenuated with just like everything. It's like I don't want to scroll through Instagram and see a cat video against some really great artist work.
Man.
Like it's just.
Exactly.
But the problem is though, it's hard to do that because you can't. It's hard to do that without gatekeeping. That's also the issue because you can't gatekeep. But at the same time, you also can't really have access. Like not everyone can have access to everything, otherwise it muddies the water. It's a hard balance, and I think that's the biggest issue with social media, in my opinion, is that there's just too much of everything, and you're not there for everything. Like if I jump on social media, it's because I want to see really cool artists. I don't care about like whatever random videos come from my feed. Although to be fair, everything I have on Instagram is art related. So even all the ads I get nowadays are like artists or art opportunities, which is great. So I'm like, that's cool. But yeah, sorry. Anyway, going back to the original question of like, do you think it's social media puts pressure on artists to be full time?
I think so. I think it brings a lot of pressure. I feel like I have to, even though I don't do it, but I feel like I have to create something every day or even every week. And I don't work that fast, never have, and I don't think I ever will. Like if you don't create something, if I don't create something, I get this mad anxiety where it's like people are going to stop looking at my posts because you know how everyone talks about the algorithm and people, Instagram is not what it used to be, where you were able to attract like people to your page and stuff like that quite easily. But now it's a lot difficult, and you have to sort of pay if you want that. But yes, I think social media is like a blessing and a curse, man. Like too much pressure, for me anyway.
So the way I look at it and the way I look at social media, I think people who listen to this podcast are going to be sick of me saying that. I feel like I say in every single episode, but the way I look at social media is like an archive. So anything I do is not about the views and about the likes and about the comments. It's about who's going to see it tomorrow, who's going to see it in 10 years' time. Like the podcast is an archive. So if somebody listens to that in 3 years' time, that's just as good as somebody listening to it today or yesterday. To me, like I try not to, because I can't say I don't, but I try not to put pressure on myself when it comes to like stats and views, which is why like when like I speak to my work colleagues about having a podcast, and the first thing they ask is like, oh, how many followers does it have? How much money do you make?
Okay.
And I say like, I don't know, because that's not interesting to me. Like that's not what I'm doing it for. Maybe thinking about your work and a particular social media like that might help you, because then it gives you less of an expectancy. You're not expecting, because it's not, you don't look at your post and be like, oh, 1,000 people didn't like it, this is disappointing. Because if 1,000 people in the street said to you they like your work, you'd be very, very happy with that. It's weird how our opinions on our own self-worth has been skewed by just a simple press of a button. It's kind of a bit weird when you think about it. But actually, it's not even pressing a button, it's just tapping a screen, which is even weirder. So it's kind of weird. So let's get into your work. Can you describe your work for those who may not have seen it?
How would I describe my work?
Yeah.
I just say portraits and words.
Okay.
Using felt tip pens.
No, okay, that's cool.
But how would I describe it? It's very, I would say it's very raw, very honest, and it's very me. Like everything you see, even if it's not a portrait of myself, or if it doesn't, it's all indirectly about myself, not in a narcissistic sort of way, but it's just me sort of like expressing my thoughts and feelings, even if it doesn't make any sense to anybody else.
Yeah, it's like the adage of like every portrait is a self-portrait. Like every piece of
Yeah.
art is a self-portrait because it involves or it contains a little bit of the person who created it. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it.
The great thing about art, the thing that I love about art and why I'm really interested in art is because
Mm.
art says a lot about the person who creates it, whether they think it does or doesn't. And I always like to
Mm.
kind of delve into like, so what, kind of like, what does your work say about you? Or kind of like, what impression do I get from this person based on their work? And then what impression do I get on them based on talking to them? Because they're always very different. And I
Yeah.
think after talking to people, I get much more of an interesting understanding about their work than I do just looking at their work. And I'm very lucky that I
Okay.
get to talk to people about their work. Like, not
Mm.
everybody does, and not everybody wants to. So I feel like it's kind of interesting. It's a great perspective to have, I think.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So your work exists in the realm of figurative art and the human condition as well, I'd say probably. But like, why do you think so many artists are drawn to exploring like the human condition?
I don't know. I think I'm guessing maybe that's because that's mostly what we see. Like people.
So are there any particular themes within figurative art that you're particularly interested in exploring with your work?
Do you know what? I like exploring shadows within faces. I don't know
Okay.
what the obsession is, even though my the images I create, but they're probably not that shadowy. But there's something quite interesting about looking at a human being everyday life, probably looking like a madman to them because I'm constantly staring at faces, and
Hmm.
I probably intimidate quite a few people. And I don't mean to do it, but I just look at people's faces, and I'm always figuring out how would I draw them? And it's just like I have to go home and draw something now. And I'm always looking at shadows on faces as well, which I don't know why I'm so drawn to that. And again, I don't really like the stuff I do. Everybody sort of like has blue or yellow or maybe even pink hues. And so talking about shadows is a bit strange because I draw like I
Yeah.
color in blues anyway. But I don't know, whenever I'm sort of shading in like shadows under the eyes or around the nose or the lips, I just find it fascinating. And I always draw from head to shoulder.
Yeah.
Always draw from head to shoulder. Nothing more than that. Not because I can't draw the rest of the body, but that's the most important bit to me. That's all I see. Or it's not all I see.
I was gonna ask about that. Like, is there a reason you don't do like full length figures?
Laziness. No, I'm joking. No, I don't know. It just makes my life easy. No, my girlfriend has told me to what has sort of like asked me, whether I want to explore a little bit more, and but I think there's a part of me that's just stuck in my own way. Like, but I want to get out of that because it's a bit boring. So maybe I'll do a whole body figure soon.
I think it goes both ways. I think if it's something you want to explore because you want to explore it, explore it. If
Mm.
it's not, then I think it's
Yeah.
fine because it gives you a really nice cohesive style to your work. Like it's very cohesive. Like if I
Mm.
see an image of yours, I know it's a Mr. Frivolous image, and I like that.
Okay, that's good.
And actually,
That's
talking
good.
about style, like, do you think you have a certain style? Because it's a question that's going to come up at some point. But the idea
Yeah.
of style, and actually, wait, let me quickly find out which ones I actually know. Actually, um,
Yeah, sure.
yeah. So literally, what I've just said, like, how important is it for you to have a specific visual style? Because I put here is like very fashion illustration meets street art slash graphic design to me in my eye. Um,
What, my work?
yeah, that's what it seems like to me.
Oh, right.
Yeah, yeah,
Where did you get that from? Is that what came into your head, or
yeah,
did I
yeah,
send you?
yeah. No, no,
Oh, I
that's what. Yeah.
see.
So when I look at your work, I was like, what do I think about this? Because I always, obviously, when I look at people's work. So okay, so when I interview somebody, I
Yeah.
research them. So I look at all their interviews
Mm.
they've done. I look at their website. I spend a good like hour looking through their website, looking at everything they've done.
Mm.
Hence me looking at your clothing brand. Hence me looking at your other Instagram accounts. Because I
Yeah,
like
I
to
was
deep dive
surprised
into
that.
somebody's
Yeah.
work, and then I kind of ask myself like, what do I want to know about this person's work? And then what I was
Mm.
kind of curious about your work is like the style, because I feel like what I did see, and I saw you post, is that there was it a school decided to do a series or some images based on your work?
Oh yeah, I saw that. Well, I think that was like a couple of years ago, but yeah.
Yeah, so I saw that and I was like, so that makes me think about like, what is it about your work that makes people consider it to have a specific style? Because if people are doing it in the style of you, it means you have a
Mm.
style. But do you think you have a style?
When I first started out, I didn't think I had a style, and I thought it was quite important because most of the artists that I followed, I could sort of identify their work without having to read who it was by. And I thought, okay, she has a style, she has a style, he has a style. What's my style? But just couldn't find one, and it was sort of like stressing me out. But then I kept drawing, and I sort of realized, hold on, wait a minute, you do actually have a style. Do I think it's important? I don't know. I guess it depends on the artist. There are so many, I guess, different ways to be an artist. There are some artists who maybe depend on having that particular style that gets them work, or they're just comfortable in just being where they are. And then there are other artists who like explore different mediums, and you unless you see their names, you won't really sort of know who they are. But with me, I don't know. I enjoy having the style that I do have, but I'm a little bit. I definitely feel like I have a style. Why people may be drawn to my work, I don't even necessarily think it's the actual image. I think it's more so the words.
Yeah, I would
I think
absolutely
that's
agree
the
with that.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
even if it's not the words by its isolated by itself, even if it's just the words around the images, I think
Yeah.
that's the thing that sort of maybe possibly draws people in.
Yeah, so
Because yeah.
so it's really funny for me because I have a huge fascination with art that has both images and words in. And I actually have
Okay.
an artist called Synthetic Go. I actually have some of her prints on my wall because they have images and words. And I have a really
Oh,
good friend called
nice.
Ryan Dean House who does images and words. And I have another good friend called Trills
Mm,
who does images and words. There's something about pairing images and words together that really,
mm.
really fascinate me. So, like, where did the idea to do that come from?
Oh, I don't know. But the funny thing is, I really don't know because I know I never started off doing that. And but the funny thing is, the whole words thing, my girlfriend discovered, like, was it last year, or I'm sure it was last year, that I'm dyslexic.
Okay.
So for the longest time, I've sort of struggled with words, but I never really understood what was going on. So anything to do with words or admin, anything to do with written stuff, I sort of avoid like the plague. So for me, obviously having a conversation with my girlfriend as well, it's quite fascinating that I would put myself through that hell
Yeah.
of drawing portraits and sort of writing stuff. Because my grammar is shit, excuse my language. It's terrible. Like no commas, no dots, no nothing, and everything's in capitals. And yeah, it's a struggle. Because I can finish a portrait quite easily, but if I don't have anything written around it, I feel like it's just empty. And it just I can't create a figurative piece of work without writing stuff around it. Oh, the struggle is real, boy. But yeah, I need words. That's what I'm trying to say.
So, how do you choose what words to put on certain images? And also, like, do you ever think about like how the words will change the way that the image is read?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, I think whatever I choose to go on a piece of work depends on how I'm feeling that day. If I decide, okay, I'm going to leave this piece of work for tomorrow, it's going to be a completely different picture. And if I decide to take that risk, well, then I decide to take that risk. But it always, it mostly depends on how I'm feeling. If I'm super down, I mean, the words, for me personally, beautiful, but it's a bit depressing. If I'm super happy, it's okay. Like I mean, I still write down what's in my head, but it tends to be a bit like a bit crap.
Hmm.
But yeah, again, it's all based on how I'm feeling. It's all based on feelings. It's just like therapy onto myself, sort of thing, with myself, I guess.
Have you ever taught a workshop?
I've done a little bit, but as in like with I did one with the Monica Art Fair. Was it True Art? They were pen art material company. I forget their name,
Oh.
but that's sort of something that I've been thinking about doing properly for the longest time. I wouldn't know if I do it on Zoom or in real life, but yeah, that's something I should be doing. I would like to do properly.
I think you'd be great at that. I think you'd be
Oh,
really
thank you.
interesting at doing that. I think it'd be so good to see you do that. And I think in real life would be the best way to do it. But I think that'd be something that I think because I think if people are already looking at your style, like let's just say a school already looking at your style, clearly you have
Mm.
some kind of influence. Clearly your work is hitting people in the right way or some kind of way. And I think like I'm not saying capitalize on that because that's not really what I'm saying. But what I guess I'm saying is
No,
that like if it's impacting people, then who else can you impact with that work? And if you then get the chance to say, actually, even if you, which I would love to facilitate at some point, but I just need the money for it. I would love to facilitate like artists going giving talks to universities. I think that would be so good.
oh wow.
I would love to do that because when I was at university, one
That-
of the best things was artist talks. Um,
okay.
and like the idea of like having say somebody such as yourself go to like a London university and talk about being an artist and creating art, like how great would that be for both you and the students? Like
Yeah.
something like that would be good. And I feel like you'd be really good at that as well. I think you just need to give yourself the confidence and the push to be in these positions to do these things. Because, they might sound great and they might sound terrifying to you,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
also going to
definitely.
be a great challenge for you. You should always challenge yourself to do something that makes you uncomfortable because that's how you're going to grow. Otherwise, you won't, you know.
If I had met you when I was in university, I would have gotten a lot further than I am now. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
that's just no, that's just what like that's just generally what I've learned last year. So your work. So as I said, to me personally, it seems very like fashion illustration meets street art / graphic design. But it's
Yeah.
also very kind of like haphazard and chaotic, which I actually love. But there's also a sense of harmony in it as well, which is kind of interesting because your eye wanders around the image, around the words, like in an interesting way. And then you look at the image, you look at the words, you try and kind of
Mm.
connect the words to words and the words to images. But like,
Okay,
how
yeah.
much planning goes into a piece of work? Or do you work very spontaneously?
Very spontaneously.
Really?
Very spontaneously. I don't have sketchbooks. I don't like to
Oh,
plan
really?
anything. If I do plan, it's usually in my head, but I don't really like to draw a sketch of what's going to go where, wherever. It's just very spontaneous. Like how I sort of work is sort of how I am. It's just very frantic, very all over the place. That's exactly how I am. It's just my personality, I guess. Yeah, as you could tell now. Maybe me having this interview with me makes my work make a little bit more sense.
Maybe. I mean, actually, I guess it does, actually. I guess it does because it's just like you want to get everything down on the paper
Yeah,
right away because you're busy doing something else. I'm kind of curious, like, have you ever created like a mural?
I would love to create a mural.
You would be so good at that. Like, I can absolutely see that because that's very spontaneous. You can be very spontaneous. That will give you the ability to be spontaneous. That seems like a perfect
Yeah.
match for you.
The thing is, I mean, I would love to do that, but I'm so. This is the whole thing. Where I'm glad you mentioned about getting out of your comfort zone. I'm so comfortable with the A4 sort of paper. Now I'm
Yeah.
extending to A3. I mean, I have done a mural. Sorry, I take that back. I did one in Croydon.
Have you?
I think, yeah, for the Rise Gallery. Wait, well,
Oh,
shit.
yeah.
But but that's why I don't really speak about it much. But in saying that though,
I'm going to be Googling that later.
it was crap. One eye was up there, the other eye was sort of diagonal. The nose was just like she was snorting cocaine. It was terrible. But you live and you learn, I guess.
Of
But
course.
no, yeah. So I would love to do murals. I just have to get the sort of confidence to sort of start, even if it's crap, just keep going. I think I will sort of do that at
So
some point.
I say friend very loosely. I say friend, but nobody's my friend. But I have an artist friend called Revs One from London. He is
Revs
yeah,
one.
but so you probably know him.
Yeah, he sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, he's an incredible artist. He's from London. I'll send you his info
Oh,
because
thank
he
you.
might be somebody really worth talking to because I think he's one of those artists that like I saw a long time ago and like I love everything he does because he's just so interesting. He's just so damn interesting.
Oh,
Interviewed him a long time ago for the podcast, like a long time ago, but he's just like so cool. And it's just one of those people like he now does art full time. He hasn't actually done art full time for a long time, but he's now only just
okay.
started, and it's just he's going to have nothing but good things. So I'll send you a
Wow.
link to him. And what I love to do
Oh,
is I love
thank you.
sending people, connecting people with one another. So anybody I think you should know, I'll send you, and I'll send them. So I send people to you, and then I send you to those people because that
Oh,
way
thank you.
it's mutual, and I love that because it's great.
Sure.
So, actually, wait, quickly before we quickly ask you a question, like the word frivolous, like where did the word frivolous come from, though? I'm just curious because it's an interesting word. I'm a huge fan of words, like I'm weird like that.
No, honestly, I just like the sound of the name.
Frivolous, yeah.
Like, yeah, like I said, it was never meant to be anything to do with art. It was just like the word MC Frivolous just entertained me. And I
Okay.
sort of found a definition. I thought, oh, that was a silly name. But yeah, it just sort of stuck. And yeah.
Yeah, because when I first discovered your work, and obviously the word frivolous being like, something that's kind of like, it's frivolous, it's, time wasting, whatever. I always kind of wondered, like,
Yeah, yeah.
was it like meant to be like an oxymoron or something? So that like, what you're doing is actually not frivolous, but it also is because
Yeah.
it's, I always kind of wondered, like, was there like an intention behind it, or was it just like a word because you liked it?
it was a word because I liked it, and I was gonna change. I was sort of gonna change it, but I thought, you know what, this maybe this could sort of work in my favor because I'm not saying I have the best work out there in the world,
Yeah,
but my work isn't so bad. It's probably very opposite to what my name is. So I thought, let me just keep it.
your work is
Kind
damn good, and I think actually, in many ways, because your name is frivolous, I think that actually just add to it. Like it's kind of
okay, that's
interesting.
cool. That's good.
Yeah, I think it works out in your favor
Yeah,
personally.
I thought it was interesting.
It just interested me when I discovered it, and I was like, this is interesting. The cool thing is I get to ask you that, which is perfect because like not everybody does.
That is true. That is true. Actually, no one else has asked me that. That's a good point.
How?
Well,
That's it. So the first thing, if someone has like a screen name, the first thing I ask them is like, why? Where did this come from? Because I'm
yeah,
always curious, like why and where and how. I think I'm just a very curious person. I'm really curious about other people. You
yeah.
know, I think it probably comes up with me not talking to a lot of people in my childhood. You know, I think that's
Okay,
probably is. I think now that I'm older, I think I value conversation a lot more than I used to. So I'm like, oh, actually, let's ask people everything and anything about themselves.
oh,
So yeah,
that's cool.
okay. So, how important is ambiguity in your work? Because the work you create, as you said, like it's very spontaneous, but that also means that doesn't have to be a specific meaning to it. Like one image doesn't have to have something specific. It means like, does that is that something you enjoy, or is that deliberate, or is that just the way it is?
I do like the idea of people just looking at my work and trying to figure out what it all means. Even if they're not necessarily right, I mean, I don't feel like they have to be. It's like whatever you get from the work, however you interpret it, I mean, that's fine. There are some pieces that I create where I would like it to be obvious as to what it is that I'm saying, but still remain um, ambiguous. I haven't quite worked out the whole ambiguity sort of stuff yet. I just put out the work, and whatever you get from it, that's fine. However you interpret it, it's completely fine. It's not like I don't think it's that important for me necessarily to sort of like have my work mean a specific thing. I don't know if yeah,
So as an artist who creates work with intention, like there's an intent behind your work.
yeah.
Like
All
how
right,
do you
yeah, yeah,
make
yeah.
like how do you make sure that the intent of your work is understood? Like the context and intent of your work is understood by the people who see it.
I don't think I do, you know. To be honest, when it comes to the stuff that I do, I don't think I'm that brave to sort of like be that obvious
Hmm.
with whatever messages I might put out there. Like I don't think I'm still sort of like in hiding.
Yeah.
So everything, as far as I'm concerned, maybe not, but everything is still sort of cryptic to me. I mean, you
Yeah.
might have, yeah. So you might have a slight idea as to an idea as to what I'm saying, but I don't think I'm bold enough yet to sort of like say, this is what I want the art to mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, I haven't really. I don't think I've gotten there yet.
Oh, that's
Not
cool. That's interesting.
100%. Not 100% at least. Just
See,
small. It
that's
just bits.
the fact that you said you're still hiding, like that's to me, like that's a really interesting consideration or like a way to look at it. Because like it
Mm,
means that you have some kind of ultimate goal or ultimate destination you want to, kind of arrive at. Or
mm.
like a kind of quote unquote artist you would like to be. That's kind of interesting actually, in terms of like, do you have this is kind of an off topic question, but
That's
like
cool.
so like do you have like any specific goals you want to achieve this year with your work?
This year,
Yeah.
right? I guess with my work, the only sort of things that come to mind is number one, more street art. I would love to
Yeah.
do a lot more than I have done. Um, Bigger scale sort of work. Um, and maybe sort of like come out of hiding, and I want to sort of start talking about like my childhood or being um, struggling being an adult. I don't know. I just want to. I've been thinking about talking a little bit more about myself, but sort of being direct, but obviously not using like self-portrait. What I'm saying,
Hmm.
obviously, like but anyway, not using self-portraits, but using like the whole sort of art therapy sort of stuff
Yeah.
to sort of like work out what happened to me in I don't know in my life when I was much younger and
Yeah.
sort of talk about it. But with
Yeah.
if people are yeah, I don't know how to explain that.
I think that's absolutely a great consideration. 'Cause I think the fact that you can use art as both therapy and just also just kind of like a way to process stuff is incredible. I think
Yeah.
actually the
Oh,
idea of
right.
like hosting like art therapy sessions would be really cool. Like where you get people to sit down and talk about like themselves and their childhood. Because I think everybody has like so the thing that I'm grateful for doing this is that everybody
Mm,
has their own story and perspective. Everyone has
mm,
their own journey in life. We just don't always get to talk about it. And I think
mm.
that it's nice to hear that you want to talk about it because I feel like it'll be great to hear because it'll be something very different from everybody else, you know?
Okay.
And I like that. And I think
Yeah.
that's really important actually that people really kind of sit down and think, you know, actually, I could really say something with this work rather than just create
Mm.
work for the sake of creating a nice image. And actually, that's a question I didn't put on this list, I don't think. But like, do you, I don't know, it's like, is it important for you to make a beautiful piece of art or do you want your work to say something more meaningful?
I think I would want it to be more meaningful, even if it's just to me. I don't mind creating like a beautiful piece of work. Or, well, if my work is beautiful, I don't mind creating a work which is visually, uh, I don't know, visually beautiful. Or what you just said, a beautiful piece of work. But for me, it just seems, I don't know, it just I'd rather it have some type of meaning, even if it's just with one word at the top, and that's it. It just has to mean something to me, even if it makes no sense to anyone else.
I about to say, but do you think it does that currently? Or like, does it do that currently?
Uh, I would hope so. Some of my work, no, it doesn't. I don't think so. But I think I've come a long way from when I first started. So I remember, not to bring in this old story, but I remember I had a friend, or yeah, an associate or whatever, and we used to talk about art. This is before the whole Mr Frivolous sort of thing, and
Yeah,
he used to have like magazine or no zines
yeah.
that he created, and they was they were saying something. It had meaning. And I was looking through it and I thought, this is quite amazing. And he came up to me and said, you know what? I really love your work, but maybe you should consider, you know, just making a statement, having something to say.
Hmm.
And I thought, fuck, like that one small conversation sort of changed everything for me. So I would kind of hope that at least most of my work would have sort of meaning. Because also at the same time, I did at one point want to be a fashion illustrator.
Oh
So
wow, that's so
yeah,
interesting. Because I got that from your work. Very much got that from
yeah,
your
that's
work.
why when you said that, I thought, oh wow, that is quite interesting to me as
Yeah,
well.
that's exactly what I got from your work.
Oh right, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's the direction I was going in. But then I thought, that's do I really want to do that? I don't know.
Why didn't you do that?
I really don't know. I don't know why I didn't. I don't know what happened. I I really have no clue. I wish I could answer that, but I can't.
But you know, the interesting thing about that though is that because you have a clothing line and because you do illustration and you do create art, like that's still a possibility for you. That door isn't closed.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, maybe,
Although
maybe.
you don't sound so sure about that, but
Sorry, but no, maybe you're right. Who
but
knows? I don't know.
that's that's so fascinating because exactly what I got from your work. Because I kind of feel like your work gives me the sense of like collage as well. It
Oh,
makes me think
right.
of collage and like how you could incorporate collage and elements into it if that was like somewhere you wanted to go or for you to
Yeah.
collaborate with a collage artist. Like that would be really interesting to see.
Oh,
Like
cool.
I would
Yeah.
love to see that. I actually might know a few artists who might be interested if you're interested.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
That could
Definitely.
be like, something like that could be cool. Like I think more like cross collaborations would be good to see in the art world. I think. Like I know
Oh,
people don't really have the time, but I think that would be really interesting.
yeah. Yeah. I would definitely like to do more
Like
collaborations for sure.
imagine if somebody did like imagine if we saw like a street art collage, like two
Hmm.
different worlds come together. Like how interesting would
Okay.
that be? You know,
That
it's
would
just
be
something that
cool.
would be cool. I don't know, like I don't know, it's just how can we kind of like draw people in from different areas of art and kind of unite them in a way that's, you know, logical, but also that's gonna kind of give everybody a bit of a different experience. Because you know, like let's just say you meet a collage artist, you
Hmm.
collaborate with them, that might change the way you could approach your work. It
That
might
is
change
true.
the way that you look at your work or think about
Yeah.
like the figure. Like if you're creating up images of the figure, it might make you reconsider the way in which you know, pose somebody or draw somebody or create
Hmm.
images. And I think everybody has everybody has something to learn from everybody else. Everyone has something to
Hmm.
teach people. And I think it's just kind of finding the right people who are going to teach you the right things is really what's valuable. And especially with art,
Hmm.
where like nobody can really teach you how to do it, you learn by practice. I think
Yeah.
just like talking to a lot of people. And actually, like, do you talk to a lot of artists?
Not, I mean, once in a while, but not that much, to be honest. Like most of the artists I do talk to, I mean, I do have artist friends,
Yeah,
but we just talk about like other stuff, not
yeah,
necessarily art all the time.
yeah. Of
But
course.
yeah, when I have spoken to artists, they tend to be like from abroad, but it's just like specific questions, but
Mm.
nothing. I think I used to do it more so, like maybe decades ago or a decade ago, but now not so much. No.
Do you think that's what's missing from art? Like, would you like to have like a space in which you can communicate with artists about art?
Oh, that would be amazing. I think I'm convinced in my head that since social media sort of changed, that whole I think that space existed, even if it was just online or via email or whatever social media was out at that time. Again, the whole Facebook, MySpace, Flickr sort of thing, or even DeviantArt. I think that space was actually there because I was going through like my archive of works and messages. There was a lot of messaging, a lot of talking about art and the sort of our process, how we products, yeah, how we create art, that sort of stuff. But that's all missing now. For me personally, I'm sure maybe amongst other artists that sort of still exists, but for me, it's just like because it's so noisy now. Like you said, there's an influx of other stuff. It's just like you get so lost in it, you get drowned in other stuff. I don't know. It's not there anymore. Not for me anyway. But I think that would be amazing if there was like a space for sort of artists to sort of like talk.
Because it makes you think like that's what I should totally create because that'd be really cool. Because I had the connections to do that. So like that'd be really
Yeah,
cool. But even if it was just like a WhatsApp group or a Discord
yeah,
server, that would work quite well because
mm,
it would be international and you'd be able to like kind of get feedback on your work. 'Cause I think the
mm,
problem with social media, and at least what I found is that social media is too passive. The problem is that people aren't engaged on social media because they're not there to engage. They're there just to scroll whilst they're doing something else.
yeah,
Like social media is just it's a distraction. That's really what it
mm,
is, for the most part. Particularly for like the general public, artists is different. Like the way artists use social media, or like people who create use social media, and the way that the general public use social media are very different.
mm,
But it's hard because like when you're trying to, well, it's hard because you feel like you're trying to market your work, and then you probably feel bad for marketing your work. But it's like you're not marketing your work because it's about you. You're marketing your work because you want people to enjoy what you do, and it's kind
yeah,
of it's like it's a hard kind of conversation to kind of have with yourself and figure out how you approach social media in a way that is genuine without feeling like you're just trying to sell things all the time or that you're here just for the money because then like money unfortunately rules everything and
mm,
all you want and all any artist wants as I always say is just more money to create more work. That's all you want to do is you just want to keep the
yes.
ball rolling. That's all it is. It's not about having a yacht, it's not about having a mansion necessarily, but
I don't
it's
know, but yeah, I'm
that
joking. I'm telling
would be nicer. I mean, not gonna lie, but at the same time, it's also like that's not you didn't become an artist because you want to be rich. Like that's
no,
for
that's
sure.
true.
It's
That
not
is true.
if you did, like you could have been disappointed.
Oh, very much so. Oh my
Unless you're Damon
gosh.
Hirst, maybe not. Actually, no. What? Actually, no. Wait, no. Actually, I take that back because I feel like with the right marketing
Mm,
and the right people behind you, you can easily make money off art. I think it's actually not as hard as we always think it is. I think it's about
yeah,
knowing the right people and having the
mm,
right marketability of the work because you can market anything.
that's true. That is true.
Look at Coca Cola. Nobody needs to drink Coca Cola,
Wow, that's very true.
but we drink it all the time because we feel like we
Mm,
need it. Like I love advertisements because it makes me question why we feel like we need things.
mm,
Like think about your work as an advertisement. Like why should you like how can you make people feel like they need your work?
mm,
Like that's probably the best way to approach it. And also like when you watch adverts on TV, like look at like watch it and see what grips you and be like, how can I apply
mm.
that to my promotion? If I was to create a video about my work, what would I do? How would I change? How
Yeah,
would I do that? For some weird reason, I love advertisements at the minute, which is super weird because
that's all
who
right.
likes ads? It's like if you're like even Instagram ads, like pay attention to
Mm,
what is being fed to you, and if you enjoy it, ask yourself why do you enjoy it? How can I
mm.
incorporate these elements into my ads? That kind of thing. I don't know why I started talking about ads because this is a rambling. Okay, I'm going to start the tangent here because I don't know why I'm rambling on about this. But anyways,
No,
it's
it's
just something
funny
that
you
I've been
said
thinking
it.
about recently.
Yeah. No, it's funny you say that because I always pay attention to stuff like that. It's even if it's not related to art.
Hmm.
I'm just like,
Yeah,
what makes me sort of like why? am I crying? Why is this advert making me so
Yeah,
emotional? But I don't end up doing anything. But it is, I think advertising and marketing is quite fascinating.
yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
But I think the problem is that there's no, or I mean, there doesn't necessarily need to be, but there's no kind of business course for artists. There's no
Hmm.
kind of like, here's how to do your taxes, here's how to do this, here's how to do that, here's how
Yeah.
to market your work, here's how to be like, here's how to like measure the statistics so you know if you're going in the right direction. I think
Hmm.
that's also the thing. Like you can create work. Like the thing is, you can create work every single day for the rest of your life. That does
Hmm.
not mean you'll be an artist in the traditional sense of like you'll make money from being an artist. It just
Yeah.
means you're a man creating a lot of work every single day. You know.
Oh, you went deep
So
there.
it's true though. But actually a question that I didn't put on this list again, which I should have put on, is like, at what point did you call yourself an artist, or at least give yourself the permission to call yourself an artist?
I think. Do you know what I think? I think it was maybe somewhere in 2005 and 2006, and I first came across Juxtapose magazine.
Oh, good.
Like,
Yeah, good call that.
yeah, I think it was Laurie. What was her name? She creates like Laurie. I can't. Laurie Early or Laurie Early.
Yeah, I think
Like
it
she
is.
creates. Yeah, she creates like these portraits with big sort of manga looking eyes. Like, can I say? I don't know if I can. Yeah, yeah, sort of big eyes and like big heads and long necks. Her work is beautiful. So I remember going in and looking at all sort of like the other images, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, I could do this shit. I mean, not shit, because none of it was shit. Sorry, I don't.
Yeah, I know what I mean. I know what I mean.
So I thought, wait, I can actually do stuff like that. Then I started. I thought, you know what, I'm an artist, and that was it. Not because of Juxtapose magazine. I thought,
That's actually really amazing because I think a lot of people feel like they can only call themselves an artist once they've made some money or sold a piece,
oh right, no, not me.
or
No.
or they feel like they have to be like comfortable doing that because it can be a narcissistic thing. If you're not necessarily paying your bills by being an artist,
Mm,
why do you have the right to call yourself an artist? When like
right.
I don't agree with that. I think you can call yourself an artist at any point. I think the word artist
Yeah.
is very wide open. There's no like it's a very loose word. There's no official definition.
Yeah.
Because the idea of art is very loose. Like there's no official definition of what is considered to be art exactly. So I think you can call yourself an artist if you bake really nice cakes, you know. So I don't know, but I think that's really cool. I think that's great. I think also Juxtapoz magazine, very good choice. Do you remember the very nearly almost?
Very nearly. Oh yeah, very VNA.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Fiona,
do
very nearly
remember.
almost.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That I think that stopped like a couple
Yeah,
of
it
years ago.
stopped. Yeah, the only reason I asked is because so I was around my mother's house the other day, and she has all my old books in her bookshelf, and one of them is a very nearly almost. And I picked it up the
Oh
other day, and
really?
I was reading it, and I was like, I should have really create a physical book for the flying football, which
Ooh, that would be good.
that'd be a
Sorry about
hell of a
that.
lot of work. Yeah, but it'll be so much work though.
Yeah,
And I'm like, I'll put that in the bank for the future.
yeah,
Also, that's
yeah.
a bit expensive as well. But it's something that I'm thinking about. I really want to create a photo book, like an
Okay.
annual, like a really cool
Yeah,
annual for artists and for photographers. I think that'd be so good.
that'd be
But
incredible.
that'll be like again a lot. This is why I want to make money off what I do, not because I want to have make a lot of money. It's because there's so many things I want to do that involves reinvesting money into other stuff to help artists. Like
Yeah,
giving people grants would be great. Like I'd love to do that. Like that'd be so good. If
yeah,
I could pay somebody's rent for a year, that'd be so good.
yeah.
Like that'd be
That would be
awesome.
amazing.
Do residencies, do grants, do studio visits, all that kind of stuff. I've just got so many things I would love to do. It's just trying to figure out how, ironically, I could make money to do it, to reinvest
Yeah,
that
yeah,
money into something else,
yeah.
which is very, very hard. But then again, I don't know, maybe because weirdly, I always feel like what I'm doing is not enough, which is really bad because I do enough already. But it's
Mm.
odd. It's quite strange. But anyways, let's not
That's
talk about
quite
stuff.
normal to think like that, though. To be honest.
I don't know. It's tough because I see so many great artists, and I just know all they need is financial help, or all they need is
Mm.
the space to create, or all they need is just pushing marketing, or all they need is just the time to be able to approach galleries or approach clients. And it's like, how can you make that happen? And unfortunately, the biggest answer really is always money. It's always like, yeah, if they had an
Yeah,
extra ten
yeah.
thousand pounds in their bank, they'll be able to do that, but they don't. And I can't just give people £10,000. Like, I would love to have it myself. So it's kind of one of them. it's frustrating because I just know so many people who could do so much, who have so much potential. But
Mm,
it's like I also understand like they're not going to reach that straight away, or in
yeah.
the time period they should. Because I had a conversation last week with a lady called Anna, and one thing that she said that I really took from our conversation was like, there's always a period of time in which your work will be collectible, and then after that time, the collectors will fade because they go moving on to other artists. And I feel like
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting when you consider the fact that if you don't have the money at the right time to boost your work and your career, like you could
Mm,
fall off that wayside very easily without ever reaching the full potential of what you could have done, which is quite sad. It's just unfortunate truth, but it's kind of also quite sad. But just something I'm
mm.
thinking about recently in terms of like how can I help artists? Because I think art is important. I don't know. It's just something I'm thinking about at the minute. Don't think anything's going to happen anytime soon, but something I'm thinking about.
You never know. You never know.
I don't know.
Never say never.
I don't know because somebody said to me, actually, one of my other artist friends was like, "Oh, you should think about getting like a grant or something like that, or getting some kind
Okay.
of funding." And I'm like, I have no idea if that's going to work or if I'd have any cause to do that. I might look into it because something like that would be interesting. Because I don't know, there's just so much I want to do to help people, and I'm like, how do I do that physically? Like, what the logistically?
Mm.
I don't know. But anyway, tangent over.
No,
Sorry,
it's a good tangent.
like
I
I'm
like
just
that. I
coming
do
out
like
of
that one.
my reverie. Right. Okay. Um, so public art, street art. I want to talk a bit about that. So you have a public
Okay.
gallery page on your website, which I'm actually really fascinated by, and I stand
Oh,
by
beautiful.
that. One of my life's missions is to see a piece of work in real life. It's just to stumble across it. Like I'm going to London at the end of next month, so I'm going to be keeping an eye
Oh,
out just in
nice.
case. Just in case. Um,
Okay, right. Okay, I get
but so
it.
so I'd love to come. Honestly, if I stumbled across one of a piece of work in real life, I would be like, this is like the best thing ever.
Oh,
I generally I
that's
would. I'd be like
amazing.
this because actually I was in London. I'm going to say last year, or unless it was this year, I can't remember. And I actually saw Rev's one. I actually saw one of his pieces of work he did on a wall,
Okay.
and I didn't realize it was there, and I didn't go looking for it. I just stumbled across it,
Yeah.
and I saw it, and I stood there, and I
Wow.
was like, "This is amazing," because seeing art in real life is so different to seeing it on screen.
That's so
Um,
true. Yeah.
but anyway, getting into the whole idea of street art, like, so what kind of inspired the idea of having your work within the environment itself, as opposed to just having work always on a screen or on paper?
Like, okay, I'm definitely just an artist. I'm not much of a street artist. I
Yeah,
mean, I like to dabble in it once in a blue, very, very, very blue moon. But the inspiration, I guess, came from like seeing other artists do it. Um, like obviously there's the whole Obey or Shepherd Ferry even. I remember there's a guy, an artist, he's still around called Jez 13. He started. I remember seeing his street art sort of stuff, and I was so fascinated by it. Not just his stuff, but like other street artists at the time. I thought that would just sort of be something amazing to do because you're almost giving. It's almost like an outdoor website, and it's self promotion that's away from the screen,
hmm.
and it's fun. Just don't get yourself into trouble. But I just like the idea of having like a piece of yourself just outside where people may come across it or may not. And if they do, they sort of like it's almost like a gift. They can sort of
Yeah,
enjoy it. Yeah.
yeah,
And there's also this crazy thrill of creating beauty, even though it might not be legal. But there's this thing about creating beauty and just sort of pulling it out there. Just when you're out there in the middle of the night and no one's around and you know, and you successfully put something up. I don't know. It's quite thrilling. But yeah, I need to yeah, so I would like to get back into that. But yeah,
so I think that's really amazing because I feel like particularly your words, like the phrases, they're really
yeah.
inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
Like how do you choose what to write, or like kind of what was the idea behind like having phrases? Because obviously they're just images, they're just phrases now. So it's like you've taken almost like you've taken the words from the portraits and put them outside separately.
The thing is, again, this I don't know why I do that to myself. But again, I hate word. I don't hate words. I love them, but I struggle with them. The whole dyslexia sort of thing again.
Hmm.
But I was writing stuff before, well, not before I started drawing, but before I started taking the drawing seriously. So I remember writing a couple of, I was doing a little bit of poetry and stuff like that. And I remember one of my mates, this is back in art school, she said, "Oh my gosh, why don't you just do this seriously?" But I thought nothing of it And then the whole sort of like Mr. Frivolous thing happened. And I was writing stuff around my portraits. But then I sort of noticed that I was writing stuff separately, but I just didn't know where to put them. I thought, I'm not going to put this on my website. This is just words. But I thought, wait, I need to do something with this. But then I realized there were two different things. Even though my portraits have words around them, this is just naked. It's just words by itself. And it was just sort of like messing with my mind. I thought, this is too much. I'm going to have to create a second alias. And I thought, wait a minute, you can do more than one thing. So eventually, after having conversations with myself in my head, coaching myself, like, it's fine. These two worlds can exist at once. My girlfriend's phrase. I just decided just to let both things happen. And that was it. Took some time though, but yeah, got there eventually.
I don't know. That's really interesting because, they're very like, they make you think because they're not just like, have a nice
Oh,
day,
right.
you know? They kind of like, it makes you appreciate like, oh, actually, people have different perspectives. And actually, I really think, they're very positive. That's the word. Like, they're very inspirational and positive. And
Oh,
like, it's
cool.
a deliberate choice.
I thought most of my written stuff to me is quite depressing.
No, you're not. No, I don't think so because I think they're realistic. I think things that aren't always depressing. I think sometimes things are realistic. Like, I
Okay.
think things can like it depends on then it depends on your perspective. And also,
Mm,
what I love the most about these phrases, is the fact that like depending on your like where you are at this moment in life or the stage of life
yes.
you're at or your perspective on the world, like you'll read it very differently. And that's the beauty about words is that you can approach the same phrase at three different points in your life, and
Mm,
you'll appreciate it and think about it differently because
wow.
you're at a different place. And the fact that like
That's
if you come across a piece of work and it says I should have put one of these up here because I didn't actually write it down on this interview. But I don't know if you have like a phrase and
yeah.
it's like like love is as fickle as fashion. That's what I remember.
Oh,
You
really?
know,
Oh,
something like that. You read that and
yeah.
you're like, and it kind of makes you stop and think like, actually, wait, it is. It's like it makes you pause, and that's what I like about them. Like I spent a lot of time, even though I should remember them, I spent a lot of time looking at them and being like, this is really interesting. And like
That is
actually
very
figuring out like they mean something, whether you know what they are or not, like they mean something. And I like that, which is why I want to see one in real life.
Oh, I see. Oh, that is very, very good to know, man. That's yeah. I mean, like I've never really known what people thought about the written stuff because, again, about having your own style. I thought my style was just like the drawings.
Hmm.
So the written stuff is quite interesting because I feel like now I get more people talking about that
Yeah.
as opposed to like the figurative stuff. So I do find that quite interesting, quite fascinating actually.
I think
I feel more
because
comfortable writing as well.
I think because it's anonymous.
Right. Okay.
Like, have you ever heard of the book Post Secret?
Yeah, they used to have a blog as well. This is way
Yeah.
back in the day, but yeah.
Yeah. It reminds
So
you
he
almost
was.
like that. Like how people love to read other people's thoughts and opinions without having to know who that person is. Like that kind
Yes.
of cloak of anonymity, like adds to the
Okay.
work.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I get that. I want to get that book now. Past Secrets. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna write. You know what's in my head. I'm gonna get that now. Thank you very much
Yeah,
for that.
Post Secrets. God, I just when I thought about your work, I'm thinking of that, like just the idea of like you get a little glimpse into somebody else's world, but you don't actually know this person, but yet you relate to that, and you kind of feel like, oh, I'd love to get to know this person, or oh, this is a good
Yeah.
perspective.
Oh wow.
So
Do you know
I
what?
think,
Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
no, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say there were two people that come to mind with the whole written stuff because I was very much inspired by Notes to Strangers,
Okay,
but because I started seeing his stuff everywhere. I didn't know who he was, and this is before the time I started putting words out. I thought, oh wait, maybe that's what I can do in my words. I could do the same sort of thing. So he definitely inspired me big time, and also maybe a lot later, Wordsmith. Like I think he took out the O from Wordsmith, but I can't remember. But yeah, just seeing his sort of stuff, how it was just written, mostly written stuff. I thought that was quite inspirational too. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
no, I was going to say I don't think we really think about like the weight of words because the thing is that like words can be very powerful, and
Yeah,
I think we kind of forget quite easily, particularly when people don't necessarily talk as much anymore, that words really do hold a lot of weight, and that actually even just reading something can really change your mood. So I actually really love what you do. I think it's actually really, really inspiring, and it's nice to see somebody wanting to be positive, like that sort of thing. And the fact that you could find this on a wall that's been like, half demolished and it looks, absolutely terrible because it's, been rained on or whatever. It's been really weathered, but it'd be like this really beautiful phrase on something that might be quite ugly, like considerably ugly. I like that. That juxtaposition is really, really nice.
Oh
You know,
wow. Well,
I don't know.
thank you.
I just find it interesting. I should want to see one in real life. I
Right.
might just take a
I've
trip off
got
to London and just hunt around.
Yeah, why
Oh
not? Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I've
no!
got your number, so
You know what you should do?
go on.
You should do a treasure hunt.
What? What? Say
A
that
treasure
again.
hunt
Do a treasure hunt.
with your work.
You know, I have actually thought of that, but I wouldn't know how to do that.
Oh, that could be such a good. That would actually be a really good way to get people interested in a gallery show.
Flipping it, you went deep. Okay.
Oh,
Treasure hunt.
a treasure hunt. 'Cause, yeah, to find one of your images in London, or like in a
That's what
certain
I'm saying.
section of London. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
not the whole of London, because that would be a very long treasure hunt. Um,
I'll
that
make
would be
enough money in
so
Western.
cool, actually. And then like the winner who gets it or whatever could get like I don't know, like a print or something, or they
That's
could get like
amazing.
I don't know, like a Zoom call with you or something. You don't know, like something like that. I don't know. That could be interesting, like as like an immersive way to get your audience interacting with your work physically,
Yeah.
because your work is physical. It's out in the real world as well, which is really cool. So you have that advantage. It's not like you have to put it out there; it's already out there. Not that you might not know where it is, but it's already out there.
That's an amazing idea, man.
Right, I'm gonna write this down because I'm gonna forget otherwise. Treasure hunt. 'Cause I think with a gallery backing as well, it might be work. It could work because like they could have potentially. I don't know if it works this way. They could have the
Yeah.
budget to facilitate that.
Right. I
Um,
see. I see what you
or
mean. Yeah.
like there could be like a way to go around it that can be kind of like facilitated by like a bigger corporation. So it's not just like
Yeah.
something you'd have to run off yourself. I mean, even just like an artist treasure hunt would be kind of cool. Something like that would be cool. Something that would get like the public involved in art in a kind of just more of an immersive, fun way that's also going to be beneficial for everybody involved, not just
Yeah.
one person. Because
That's
like
amazing.
I don't
That's
know,
amazing.
that'd be really cool actually. How would I organize
Yeah.
that though? I have all
Don't
these cool
worry.
ideas. I just have no means to do any of them. That's the sad part. Well, yeah, we'll never say never. So,
Never say never. There you go. I'll give you
hmm.
50%, maybe even 90.
So one thing I wanted to ask about is the idea of ownership of the work that's found outside. Because I'm always kind of curious, like because obviously you as the artist has created the work and you put it
Yeah.
outside, but does that mean that the person who's found it can they take it home and claim it as their own, not as their own art, but like as something that they found, like as their own item or whatever? If that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Why not? I don't mind.
Because I'm always curious because obviously it's not found art though because it's art that you've put out there. But at the same time, like because they've stumbled across it, like who does it belong to?
I think that's why I named it public gallery. So it's for the
Hmm.
public. If you happen to, let's just say my work, but if you happen to stumble upon my work and it's been out there for a while or whatever, and I mean, it would be nice if it could stay up, but that's not the reality of that type of work. So if it's not worn away by the weather or whatever, and you decide you want to take it home, I say go for it. Why not? I take that as a compliment. I've been sent emails in the past of people saying, "Oh, I found your work. This is amazing. You know, I put this up here, whatever." And I reply back, and I take it as a compliment.
That's so cool. Someone's like, "Oh, I've took down this wall that has your work on it. I've taken it home with me."
Oh, whoa. Could you imagine? So you'd have
That'd
to
be
speak
so
to the
cool though.
customer. But yeah,
I don't think I think about bricks and creating work on bricks and having like building a wall. Okay, I should probably not think about stuff like
imagine.
that. That'd be really cool though. Just some kind of community like art, particularly in London where there's so many artists.
Yeah,
Like some kind of community building, artist driven incentive that's going to get people together, get the public
that would be
involved.
amazing. Yeah,
It could be good, particularly after the pandemic. It could be good. I don't know. We'll see. So I want to ask you a couple more questions about your work, actually, if that's
yeah,
okay.
sure.
Because I was just curious. There's a few things I was actually quite curious about. So, who are the characters you draw?
The characters I draw, it's, it's mostly just like images that I find,
Hmm.
either online or in magazines. But they just tend to be randoms. Or only on a few occasions I might just draw someone, I don't know, someone famous or even people that I know. But on the most part, yeah, it's just random images.
Yeah, because I was wondering, like, that's kind of really curious because I think depending on who the person is for a piece of your work, it would really change the way your work is read, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I see what
And
you
I-
mean. Actually, yeah.
and I was just wondering, like, have you ever considered doing like, or do you do like commissions where you could have like a certain person in the work, or you could have like, say, somebody give you a family member or whatever, and have that as the main character in your work?
I have done commissions before. I don't do much of it. Actually, I don't even know why I don't do much of it. But yeah, I've definitely done commissions in the past. I don't know if I'll put family members in my work. I mean, not because I dislike them or anything like that. Maybe because it's a bit too personal, too deep, I
Hmm.
guess. So even like in the idea of doing portraits, I've been told to do that, but it's a bit too yeah, might be a bit too much for me for now. But maybe one day, who knows? Maybe I'll find yeah someone to draw constantly. Maybe even my missus, who knows?
I think that's the interesting thing because like you could easily create pictures that are more personal to you and nobody will ever know because they don't necessarily know you because you have like the
Yeah,
cloak of anonymity to be able to kind of be like, oh, I can create this image of this person. And to us, it would be like this really interesting face, but to you, it would be actually somebody you know. I don't know. I think this could be so quite interesting, the idea of like custom art made for people, you know, that kind of idea. That could be quite
yeah,
nice.
yeah. Yeah, it's a very good idea actually. Yeah.
So I was thinking like you could do like a commission series based on like book characters or movie characters or something like that, even if there was like a certain client you wanted to work with or like a certain company you wanted to work with.
Ah, so sort of like tweak it towards the sort of a client or
Yeah, you could do like let's just say, you know, you're really into Harry Potter, or let's just say, you know,
yeah,
somebody's into Harry Potter, you know, they
yeah,
might commission you to do like a series of like 6 images of like each of the main characters plus, you know, in this, you know, or like you can pull from like lines from films or
yeah.
other kind of like words and phrases from places that people recognize, you know, something
That's
like
a good
that.
thing. Yeah, I like that. I do like that. I was actually thinking of doing like a series of portraits of podcasters that I listen to.
That's
But I
cool.
don't know. Yeah, I know this is a podcast and you have a
Yeah.
podcast, and I'm not just saying that just because of
Yeah.
that. But
No, no, no.
I would
That's
I'd love to do your portrait actually. But
yeah.
yeah, it was just a thought I've had for a very long time. Whether I'll do it or not, I don't even know. But hopefully, just
But
an
I like,
idea for you.
yeah, no, but I like the idea a lot. I think it's really nice because it kind of it gives you the chance to explore different things and try new
Mm,
things and kind of also it gives your work a sense of like an anchor point. 'Cause I think the thing with your work is that you can do what you do indefinitely because you do it so well, and there's so much scope there that you could do it very indefinitely. It's just figuring out how to make it evolve constantly. I
yeah,
think because like, do you actually ever worry about repetition?
all the time, all the time. I think to the point where I think I've slowed down because I'm slightly bored. And I've had a discussion with one artist in particular. I forget his name, Alex Odd. I can't remember his name, which is really
Yeah.
bad. But I remember we were talking about he's a really good artist and a very good tattooist. But I remember we were talking about like evolving with our work, and I was sort of like stuck because I just keep doing the same sort of thing again and again and again. Not to say that I don't enjoy it, but after a while, it's just like a bit boring. Well, I don't really feel as motivated as I did when I sort of first started. So I would like to evolve and try something a bit different. Maybe try different mediums. Maybe not even just do just portraiture sort of work.
Hmm.
But yeah, we'll all see. I mean, we'll see. I have no idea. I'm just going with the flow at the moment.
But that's good though. I like the fact that you're in a space where you're conscious, that you're like, cool, I love what I do. I'm enjoying what I do, but I'd love to take it somewhere else. You know, I like that idea.
Yeah,
I like maybe it would be just something simple as collaborating with different artists. Maybe creating like a
yeah,
series of, 10 to 12 images just based, collaboration with a different artist and seeing how that changes your work and influences what you do.
yeah.
Um,
That's definitely a good idea as well. Yeah.
because the cool idea is that like you don't actually have to change the work itself. As you said earlier, it
Mm.
could be like the medium, it could be like the place in which it's seen. It could be
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
even if you were to explore or kind of foray into like digital art or something like that, it could be really interesting.
That is so interesting. You said that. I used to do well a bit of digital art way back in the day, but I would like to return to that.
Because imagine if your work was animated, like how interesting would that make the work? You know,
That's incredible, quirky.
like how cool, like, and there's actually an artist that I know of called Maxomatic. And thinking about a lot of stuff he does recently, well, he does a lot of like a huge range of like collage, different kind of collages. But a lot of stuff
Yeah.
he's done recently is like animated collages, and they're really interesting when you look at them.
Oh,
I'll send
right.
you his
Okay.
work. I'll definitely
Oh,
send you
thank
his
you.
work. But
Thank you,
something like
brother.
I'm just thinking like how could you extend your work so that it becomes an experience, not just an image? The great thing about art is that art is very accessible. We can see art all the time. The problem
Yeah,
is that it needs to make an impact for us to want to stop to view it and to question it. So I think the problem
that's
is
true.
that we see so much art all the time, we just don't always necessarily give it the time that it deserves in terms of like how can you make an impact on somebody, not just how can you create a nice image. I think they're two very different things.
No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, I agree as well. You're right.
So, do you actually think that your work translates well online? Because your work is very busy. There's a lot to see, there's a lot to read, there's a lot to look at. Like, do you think that a small screen, like a phone screen, does it justice?
Maybe not. Maybe not, you know. I feel like whenever I create a piece of work, obviously eventually, maybe after a couple of days, I always end up hating it, thinking, oh, it's crap. Then a month or two later, and maybe even years later, I sort of like, oh, I'm sort of like, yeah, I really like this. It's not
Yeah.
that bad. But anyway, in saying that, when I scan my work and I put it online, there's a big difference. I know it's the same image and all of
Yeah.
that, but there's a shoot. I feel like it kind of loses the quality when it's online. Look, even though I've scanned it at a high DPI or whatever, but you just even when I take photos, you just don't get the same sort of quality as you would if you saw it on no well in real life. So yeah, I do think um they can look quite different.
I think with your work, especially because it's so busy, because there's so much to look at, and because it's just kind of is made to be viewed in person. Like art generally is made to be viewed in person. Like I think art always looks almost always looks better in real life than it does on a screen
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
because it's not just about looking at the image, it's also about the experience in which you're looking at the image. You know, if you like say for instance if you're in a gallery space, that's like a dedicated space for that particular work. Whereas in like
Yeah,
online it's kind of like a free for all for everybody. You know, it'd be like a really cool piece of art versus like a cat video or versus, you know, some like celebrity gossip or whatever. Um,
yeah.
and I think we also don't really think about the idea of like where work is located and like how you're viewing work. Um,
Okay.
it's like, you know, your website is very well designed because you go through it and we see your work and it's just very kind of like straight to the point.
Oh, I see.
Um, whereas in social media it isn't, you know, and I think that's kind
Okay.
of important, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's very important, I think.
You know what? You just reminded me. This is like maybe 15 years ago. It could have been longer. But there used to be a gallery called the Miles Gallery,
Yeah.
and my friend Tina Zeigler, she sort of exhibited like other artist work there. And I remember coming across what I had heard of this guy, and again, this is another artist name I'm going to forget, something McDowell. I had seen his work online, and his work was really good. I'm a fan. I really liked the stuff that he did. But just he's an American artist, but just going to the gallery, I think it was in Westbourne Grove, somewhere around there anyway, seeing his work in real life. His work is slightly caricaturish, but when I saw his work in real life, I couldn't believe how incredible it was. Just the way the details of the paints that was sort of spread on his work, and it was beautiful. If you saw his work online, you'd appreciate the work, but he's very witty with his art. I never really sort of appreciated the actual beauty of the techniques, the paints that he used, how he used it. It was incredible.
Part of the problem I think nowadays that artists have is that it's very, very easy to create work for an online audience only, or to feel like
Yeah,
you're only making work for an online audience when actually you would like your work to exist in real life. I think not
yeah,
every single artist has like a gallery show. Not every single artist has their work hanging up somewhere or like have their work, you know, physically exist. And I think that's the one kind of key difference between artists and photographers, especially. Like a lot of photographers never print their work, whereas an artist always has something physical in front of them. Um,
mm,
and actually, it's having like more gallery shows and kind of showing your work more. Obviously, your work is already public, but showing your work more publicly is a goal of yours.
yeah. At one point in time, it was very important, and I know it can sort of help you when it comes to reaching audiences. But with galleries, especially for me, and especially in the UK or London, UK, whichever, it's a little bit difficult because you know the whole saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yes.
Um, I've noticed with certain galleries, they're very cliquey. You'll always see familiar artists showing in certain galleries again and again and again. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But it can be very difficult to sort of like put your foot in the door. But that's my experience in this country. As for like abroad, I felt like it has been in the past a lot easier. But now with social media, how it's changed everything, it's almost like you don't really need it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe I might try to email a few different galleries again and see if I can get some work out there. But yeah, again, I'm very spontaneous. I don't really plan or organize. I'm not really good at planning. So, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, so it's something you would like to do, but it's not something that you feel like, you have to do. It's not like, oh, I need to do this because it's like,
Yeah,
because yeah, as you said, like I think with social media, I think, the good question of like, do I even need to have gay representation anymore is kind of like a good kind of idea to have in mind because, the kind of work you produce, as long as you've got the finance to keep producing more, that's all you kind of need. It's just finding how to do that like solidly. And I
yeah,
think I think especially nowadays when the idea of an artist versus the brand, like are you an artist or are you a brand? I think that kind of comes into play in terms of like, well, how much money do you want to make? And kind of like who are your audiences? And there's a lot of questions you have to ask yourself as an artist beyond just
mm.
the mere creation of the work itself. And like, do you think that do you consider yourself a brand?
Ooh, I don't know. For Philip Ninjas, yeah, I would
Yeah.
say it's a brand of sorts. But for Mr. Frivolous, just me. I mean, generally, I always believe that no matter who you are, you kind of are a brand. As in, like, you're always representing yourself.
Hmm.
The way you dressed, your identity, your style, whether you like it, know it or not, you're like a brand, a walking CV. So maybe in a way, I might be a brand, but I don't know. I just consider myself just like an everyday artist.
It's hard to actually figure out, or at least in my opinion of talking to a lot of people, like it's hard to figure out at what point do you become a brand if you feel like
Yeah.
you are a brand, and also at what point do you lose your artistic identity by becoming a brand? I feel like the idea of brands and the word brands to me personally kind
Mm,
of screams of commerce, and I think art and commerce don't always go hand in hand. I think you kind of
okay.
give something up to become a brand.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, for instance, like as we always speak about, as I always speak about, Damien Hirst. Damien Hirst is a brand. He's no longer an
Mm,
artist. He doesn't even create his own work. He's a brand.
yeah.
It's about his name,
Mm,
not about what he does. Like he can literally color a piece of paper red, and people will be like, "Cool, this is a Damien Hirst." Like people say, "This is a
yeah.
Damien Hirst." They don't say this is an piece of art by Damien Hirst. I think that what constitutes as a brand, as opposed to like an artist being like, this is a piece of artwork by Mr. Frivolous. That's different. Um, I don't know. I just find the idea of branding very, very interesting in the art realm because I feel like a lot of artists don't like business, or they don't really know much about business, or they don't.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
They haven't had the knowledge that they need to survive as a business as an artist.
Mm,
So I think I think there's a huge kind of gap in the market there for people to kind of pick up on in a positive way. Because yeah, I think the whole business side of art, I think we need to have just a huge kind of consideration of how to, you know, how hopefully teach artists business, things they need to know.
sure,
You know,
100%. Yeah,
even just stuff like taxes, even stuff like, getting suppliers,
yeah,
how to ship your
definitely.
work, how to package your work, all the kind of quote unquote boring admin stuff. I think that's actually what's probably most needed to be talked about rather
Mm,
than, always than it always being just about, the actual visual art. I think all of the stuff behind the scenes is actually much more important to talk about than necessarily kind of just like, what materials you're using particularly. I don't know.
no, I agree. I
It's
agree.
just a
I
huge,
wish I had
yeah.
all of that knowledge when I was in college. Like, it would have helped me a lot.
Well, do you actually have a piece of advice for artists who might be listening?
I wouldn't sort of worry about art school. I don't think it's a bad idea to go to art school or get a degree if that's what you want to pursue. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I did it. But I don't think you need a certificate to be an artist. If you know you're passionate about art and you know in your mind that you can do it, all you need is YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, social media, and a website, and you're good to go. Just you don't need to pay thousands of pounds or hundreds of pounds just to prove that you are an artist. Just have a passion for it. Know that you're good at it, and just get on with it. And that's it.
So if nobody saw your work, would you still create it?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. The whole art therapy thing before that was even a thing on my website. I create the art obviously for people as well, but it's mainly for me. So even if no one saw anything, I wasn't out there. I didn't. There was no Mr. Frivolous. I would still be doodling, drawing, and writing rubbish on a piece of paper. Probably lose them, put them in a bin, use whatever. But I need art, so I don't see myself living without it, whether it makes me money or not.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think that's always interesting because I think a lot of artists, when I ask them that question, they say that they would still create it. But then a lot of
Yeah.
people, sometimes you get the odd occasion artist who says no, they wouldn't because it's about the
Okay.
audience. Because I think, and it's like there's a quote that I heard in a podcast by a sculptor, and he said that a piece of art is not finished without a viewer to view it. Like, do you agree with that?
Oh, yes and no. I don't think you need someone to view your art for it to be art. But at the same time, it would be a shame if you were to hide that piece of art because it just seemed like a waste of talent in a way. And I know I'm probably contradicting myself with what I said earlier on, but if you're good at something, I just personally believe that why not just show it to the world? Like to keep it to yourself is fine, but just let the world know who you are.
So I'm quite curious. How did the clothing brand Tffb Ninja start?
So okay, I used to work in retail many like years ago. Um and I was sort of really into fashion. And we used to have customizers at the back of our well, not that's not really my shop, but it was a brand, a denim brand, and we used to have customizers at the back of the store. And I used to always see how they would take the jeans and shirts and whichever and customize them. And it was fascinating to watch them because this is something that I always wanted to do as well.
Hmm.
Um, but also, I've always been into fashion since I was a kid. I remember my mum for a while. She started going to college, and she was studying fashion. I used to get all of these magazines like Vogue and Elle and sort of collect them and sort of obsessed. To, and this is when I was probably uh, late primary school, early secondary school. I thought at one point I would end up being a fashion designer, but I didn't take that route.
Hmm.
But anyway, so that a mix of that, where I used to work, watching those the ladies customize the clothes, that sort of inspired me to perhaps get into fashion in some way. So I was supposed to start for Philip Ninjas ages ago, like decades ago. And it was supposed to start off as being a clothing brand, but for whatever reason, it didn't. So it ended up being a blog. It ended up being a graphic design sort of
Wow.
company. Then I just thought, you know what? I've got to make up my mind. What am I going to do? So all the years have gone by. It's only now that I've decided. Obviously, I had to include my girlfriend in it because she was the one who sort of inspired me as well. So yeah, I just decided, you know what? You've got this idea, just do it. You've literally wasted decades. No matter what happens, just do it. Get it out there. So now I'm here with what it was supposed to be originally.
Hey, that's interesting because like the kind of change it's gone through from start to finish will also impact the way you create it now and the way that you promote it now and the
Yeah,
imagery and the kind of both the clothing itself, but also the imagery that's associated with the clothing as well. So
yeah,
like,
definitely.
how does it differ to other brands? And kind of like, how do you how did you like? actually, like, is your target audience the same as Mr. Frivolous?
I don't know, I don't, I feel like Mr. Frivolous audience is slightly different. But for Philip Ninjas, it's just such a weird name. Just saying it out loud. Sorry, I'm just realizing, but it's too late now. But
Maybe
way
slightly
too.
a bit too late.
Oh man. Yeah, with for Philip Ninjas, I don't know what the audience is. I know for now, I guess the main focus is sort of menswear. I would like to sort of like delve into women's wear as well at some point. But I think that's where it differs from Mr. Frivolous because I feel like I have more of a female audience with the whole Mr. Frivolous sort of stuff. And with for Philip Ninjas, I'm trying to sort of like, I mean, it's for everyone. I don't really mind at all. I'm not really worried whether it's a menswear sort of company or a women's wear sort of company. But it kind of is the stuff that I would like to wear. So I guess that's probably why the focus, in a way, is kind of menswear.
So I think that's just a really idea to have like a focus because I feel like the interesting thing I think about fashion, and I'm not an expert by any means, but I always feel like we don't really see enough, or maybe it's just the way I'm looking and the clothes I buy, but we don't see enough independent menswear like labels or collections that is kind
Mm.
of accessible.
Yeah,
I feel like because I think fashion is always very very women heavily focused, which makes sense wise in terms of like
yeah,
the
yeah,
market. But I think
yeah,
it's also nice to kind of have your own little niche and create something that you really enjoy that you would actually wear yourself, but also like
yeah,
be able to cater it to other people and be like, cool, we can always make it women's wear further on down the line, or we can always change
yeah, yeah,
it
definitely.
down the line. But right now you have a direction, you have like a potential audience that you want to include.
Mm.
But I'm kind of curious, like, do you think you have, or does FLN have a visual identity?
Everything is just like trial by error.
Hmm.
Is that the saying? I don't even
Yes.
know what the
Yeah,
definition
yeah,
is. So I'm literally just working things out as I'm going along. Um, I know usually from the other brands I've seen, the way that you'd be able to tell who they are is just like their logo. And I
Hmm.
haven't started off that way because in my head, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it just seems a bit boring, especially knowing that, I'm an artist. I could just sort of like get my art on a t-shirt. And that to me in my head just seems more visually pleasing. But I do get the whole idea of like having your logo out and sort of putting it out there. But I don't feel like people would be sort of drawn to that. But I don't know. I don't know how people would be able to tell that this is a for Philip or FLN brand sort of thing yet, because even though I sort of came up with it in my mind years ago, it's a very new brand. So
Hmm.
again, it's all a learning experience at the moment.
Because I'm very, very curious because I'm kind of
Mm.
wondering like how running a clothing brand and being an artist, like how they both differ and are similar. Because I feel like,
Mm.
they're both brands, but at the same
Yeah,
time, like their audiences are very different or potentially quite different. But also just this idea of like the brand in terms of clothing, in my opinion, again, I'm no expert, but in my opinion, like you need a strong visual identity. You need to know your
mm.
market. You need to like there's a lot of
Yeah,
certainties in which you need to know. Whereas an
yeah, yeah.
artist, you don't. Whereas an artist, you can rely upon like your work being the identity, kind of
Mm.
like the way in which you do something the identity. Whereas in I think clothing is such a different ball game to creating art. So
Yeah, 100%.
I'm
Yeah.
very curious just in terms of just like how you navigate that and how you manage that. Um, I'm just curious about in general. I'm actually really, 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 really looking forward to seeing how it develops and seeing where you go with it and seeing like how you approach like marketing, how you approach kind of getting more customers, how you approach kind of just the making of the clothes. I'm actually really curious. I think creating a clothing company is so much harder than people give it credit for. Like so much
Oh, yeah,
harder.
yeah, yeah.
Because I think because it feels like, or it seems like, everybody and their cat can just create a clothing line when it's
That
really not
is,
the case because it involves a lot of time and effort and dedication and a lot of
mm,
patience. You know,
yeah, 100%.
and I
Yeah.
think and is it actually had there been or like is there anything that you've learned from running a clothing brand that surprised you?
Not yet. I mean, the only sort of thing that's a little bit difficult is I feel like it's a lot easier to be an artist than to sort of, like you were saying, like to sort of try to run a clothing brand. I know how to be an artist. I've been like one since I was a kid, but I don't know anything about, or not much about having apparel brand or a clothing brand or a brand like that. So I'm literally just learning as I'm going along. Like I sort of work stuff out from other brands that I'm into, like let's just say Stussy or Stussy or however you pronounce them, or Rebel 8, um, or Ruka, RVCA. But yeah, everything is just new for me. So even I'm just thinking about what's if I had started this brand a couple of years ago, the designs I had back then, I don't think it would have. I think it would have been very more graphic design based, and I don't even think I would have put like Mr. Frivolous style work in FLN because I didn't want to mix the two. So, but now I've just decided they're just sort of like one person, but just two different things. So yeah, I'm just working stuff out in my head
They're like two
still.
sides of the same coin, in a way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, in a way.
See, that's interesting though, because I feel like you've given yourself a lot of scope to kind of you've given yourself a lot of scope to kind of branch out into different commercial aspects and projects with your work.
Yeah.
And there is an artist that actually you're part of the Baker House Gallery. So
Oh
you would
right, yeah,
know,
yeah.
so you probably know Tom Lerner.
Very cool guy. Fair
Yeah,
him and his
so
brother Andy. Very cool guys.
I don't know his brother, but I met him. He was actually episode number 3 that I recorded for the podcast. So I've
I
known him
think
for
I
a
listened to
good few
that. Yeah,
years. But like he's the
yeah,
person that comes to mind when I think of an artist in commercialism. Like he's one of these artists who has very incredibly managed to get his work make his work extremely commercial without actually
yeah.
sacrificing the artistic intent of his work. Like, he has
He's
his work, on the side of trains, on billboards, embedded into tables,
he's done
all of
very well.
these
Yeah.
insanely cool, crazy, amazing things. And I was
Mm,
speaking to him not that long ago, and he's only just doing like more and better things, and it blows
mm,
my mind. But I think somebody like him is a perfect example of like the limits of what you can actually do with your work, even in the commercial realm. I feel like a lot of the time we look at art and we think, oh, it's not that commercial, or we look at it being like, how are you going to sell that?
yeah, yeah.
And I think we also forget like it's not about how you sell it; it's about how your work can be incorporated into things that are already being sold. So the
Mm,
idea that you're creating a clothing brand is so clever in a way because it means that
mm,
you're like this is like kind of like your way to dip into a more commercial market that maybe your actual drawings and illustrations weren't rich.
yeah.
So I like that. I think that's really cool. And also it's nice because it's like, well, what's next? You can have like car wraps, or you can do like billboards, or you can do like wrapping paper. There's like so much possibility and so much
Yeah.
endless possibility of where your work can actually be, and how your work can be produced and where it can be produced on. So I
Mm.
like this idea. I think it's a really clever idea, and I
Oh,
honestly hope it all
cool.
goes well for you. But I'm very
Oh,
much
thank,
keeping my eye. I'm very much going to keep my eye on what you do. I think that's really, really interesting.
oh, thank you,
I
thank
think
you.
it's very interesting because I'm always like, yeah, I'm really curious like where it's going to go and like how you're going also like and how you're going to keep up with both demands of both because this is also the thing. It's about balance
Yeah,
because
yeah,
also
exactly. Yeah.
you want to have a life as well, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like maintaining that balance is kind of, and that actually, I guess that's a good question to ask you is like, how are you currently maintaining that balance between, the clothing brand and being an artist and also having a life?
It's funny you mentioned Tom because I had met him and his brother. They had an exhibition at it was in Portobello Road, Ladbroke Grove, and I forget, was it West Bank? No, I don't think it was West Bank Gallery. Anyway, there was a gallery there, and I was working in the retail store that I mentioned earlier.
Ah,
I just walked across because I had some work in the same gallery as well. And that's how I met them. And we sort of like struck up a friendship. And he's a very cool guy, both of them, him and Andy, him and his brother. Amazing guys, amazing works. But yeah, so the balance between for Philip Ninja or having a brand and being an artist
yeah.
and um maybe there is no balance. I don't know. I barely know how to be myself and find balance. The balance doesn't exist. I think that's the
Fair
answer.
enough. No, okay, I
Yeah.
mean, okay. So do you feel like you're part of a larger art community?
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I probably only feel like that if I'm online and I'm talking to other artists, or even if I'm just if even if I'm just writing a little comment
Hmm.
and I get I don't know, a like. Maybe that's if I feel like I'm being acknowledged, even in the smallest of ways by other artists, then yeah, I guess I can feel like a community. But if I'm working on something by myself, I do feel like I'm the only sort of artist
Hmm.
around at that time. So I guess a bit of both.
That's interesting actually, because it makes me kind of curious as to like, do you ever feel lonely whilst creating? Because you're creating in isolation?
I don't feel lonely as in like in a depressing sort of way.
Hmm.
I think I much prefer to work by myself alone where there's no one around, just
Hmm.
me, uh, art materials, or maybe some music and a podcast, like the Flying Fruit Bowl. Um, but yeah, I don't really feel lonely. I find it quite liberating to be honest. It's a
Oh.
very nice, safe sort of feeling. So I definitely don't feel the loneliness.
See, that's quite interesting because a couple of artists that I've spoken to, some really great people, said to me that because they work in a studio by themselves a lot, that they can
Mm,
sometimes feel very lonely whilst creating work because obviously they're by themselves. They don't really ask people's opinions on their work whilst they're creating work. You know,
okay.
because there's not a lot of opportunities in life in which you kind of spend time with yourself in that way, you know?
Yeah.
And also not just that, like
Okay.
you're relying on your own opinions and thoughts of what you're doing, and because you're like almost incubated in this space to creating this work, and then when it, and then when you finally finish the piece of work, you're then out. You kind of release yourself back into the wild, I guess, in that respect.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting that actually it goes the opposite way for you. And actually, do you feel like you're more, or like, are you more introverted or more extroverted as a person generally?
I think I'm a bit of both. My mum, well,
Yeah,
but in saying that, my mum always says amongst out of my siblings, I've always been the introvert. Like I'm very
yeah,
well. That's probably because I'm around them. When I'm around them, I'm very quiet, very reserved, and you won't really get a peep out of me. But it's in saying that if I'm with friends or even my missus, I'm the complete. I can be the complete opposite.
hmm.
So I don't know. I feel like depending on where I am, my surroundings, I can be a bit of both.
So I'm always curious, like if like introversion and extroversion, or like I guess ambiversion would be the two. Like if that ever plays a role in the artist and the artist's work, because one thing that it plays a huge role in is like marketing, because a lot of artists, quite a lot of artists are quite introverted, which means when it comes to marketing and promoting themselves and like kind of showing themselves online, especially for instance, like they find
Yeah,
it very hard because they're not necessarily outgoing, they're not necessarily like in front of the cameras all the time, for instance.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
And it kind of begs the question, or at least it's a question me and a good friend called Ryan Dean House was mentioned on probably every single interview. Spoke about a long time. It was the idea of like, what's more important? Is the personality of the artist more important, or is the skill of the artist more important?
If you had asked me this ages ago, I would have said the skill of the artist, and I do still think that that is very important. But I've only started realizing very recently how important it is for an audience to see the personality of an artist as well. Even I don't even to an extent more so than the art sometimes, and that can be like I've listened to podcasts where I've or YouTube videos where I've watched artists, be it singers or painters or whatever, that I may not be a huge fan of, but I've listened to them and I've just sort of converted into a fan just
Hmm.
based on their personality and what they're saying. And it's just like, it makes sense. Like there's been so many people who have told me, get out there, show your face, speak to people. And I'm like, no, I'd rather not. I'm not really into that sort of stuff. I'm not to say it's a bad thing, but I'm only starting to realize how important it can be with your work when it comes to your work. So yeah.
So that's actually something I noticed when I was going through your Instagram is the amount of interview snippets that you share from different people that are very positive and that have that message about like, just great work. I think there's one from like Andrew 3000 that I watched. It was like, he was just like,
Ah,
great work.
yeah, yeah,
And I actually really like that a lot. I actually went through your Instagram and looking at all the videos that you posted or reshared from different interviews because I think we often forget that creativity is not exclusive. Creativity can be for anybody,
yeah.
and I think it's just having the courage. I think a lot of creativity involves courage, the courage to put your work out there, the courage to say
Mm.
call yourself an artist, the courage to just be confident and happy with what you do. because
Mm.
sharing work is very vulnerable. You know, it's
Yeah.
very much as we said earlier, like every image is a self-portrait in the sense
Mm.
of like any image that you put out in the world is made from you and your thoughts and emotions and feelings. So it can be very
Mm.
vulnerable to put it out in the world. And I think I really, really like the idea that your feed is very positive. Like you come
Okay.
across it and you look at it and it's like, this is really interesting. It tells me that you're thinking not only of yourself, but also of other people, that you want to inspire other people as well.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
you're like,
Definitely.
actually, you know, you want to kind of like bring people in and kind of remind them that actually, like, we can all be creative. We can all have like an equal footing. We can all be, you know, just as great as one another. There's no kind of like elitism. And I like that. I have a
Yeah.
lot of respect for that because not only are the interview snippets that you share are absolutely cool, but it also gives me a huge kind of idea of the kind of person you are in terms of like, as we said earlier, or like previously, like you should totally do like artist talks in like schools and stuff like that'd be so good to see because that's definitely the kind of person you are. Like genuinely, not just because you can be to be cool. It's just like the way you
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
And I
Oh,
love that. I
thank
think
you.
that's such a good idea. I think that's such a good idea. Like spreading
Oh,
positivity is never a bad
oh, that's cool. Thank you. I never know what to do with compliments, so thank you very much.
thing. I'm exactly the same way. I'm just like, yes, I'm going to pretend you didn't say that, but cool. Um, just a few more questions because I don't want to keep
Yeah.
it much longer. But so I have a question for you from the last artist that I spoke to, a lady called Anna Carr. And her
Yeah.
question for you is, if you could describe your work using one word, what would it be, and where do you want to go with your work?
Right. So to describe my work using one word,
Yes.
well, for the longest time, I've described my work using two words, which is beautiful, quirky. Um, yeah. If I had to describe it using one word, then I'd say, what would I say? It would either be raw, emotional, or vulnerable. One of those three words. Maybe vulnerable.
Perfect. That's absolutely perfect. And where do you want to go with your work, which is the second part of that question?
Where do I want to go in my work? I would, even if I don't know about it, I would like to inspire people.
Hmm.
Um, I guess I would like to have like a positive effect on people's lives. They don't have to be like art collectors. They could just come across my work by chance. If I can make someone I don't know happy, someone who's going through a bad period of time, through what's the word? Not bad period of time. Someone who's going through like a shitty time. Like I don't know if I said it early on, but I sometimes would receive loads of emails about people talking about how important my work has been in their lives. And obviously I can't read out the messages, but
Yeah.
it's been so shocking and such a pleasure to read because I never really thought that I could have that type of impact on someone, be it depression or loss, grief. Like I had no clue. So reading stuff like that, I mean, on one hand, it's quite sad, but on the other hand, it's just like me being just an average Joe. You just really don't know who you could affect in such a beautiful and positive way. So stuff like that, if I could do more of that with my art, I'd be a happy man, happy artist. Yeah,
I think, but the thing is, I think you already do, which is great. But also, I think you have the potential to do so much more, which is also just as good. And I think the great thing is that you know what you want. It's just figuring out how to get there in a
yeah.
genuine, honest way. So, do you have a question for the next artist I interview?
Oh right. I feel like I did have a question before, didn't I? I actually stole the question from my old blog, Peanut Super Lux,
Ah,
ages ago. So I don't know why I've forgotten it. Um, the question is, name three artists, dead or alive, that you would like to have brunch with, and maybe what would you ask them?
yes, yes, that's perfect. Absolutely
Oh,
perfect.
cool.
So, what do you think your work says about you as a person?
I think it's definitely very revealing that I'm quite mad for sure. Um, I think it definitely shows how messy my mind is, and
it probably shows me trying to figure stuff out with myself, with life. It's just, I think it's for someone who likes to be as anonymous as he can be. I think it shows a lot of me. Well, to me, it does anyway. I'm always curious. I'm always asking questions. I'm always wondering about things, about humans, our behavior, and the fact that you mentioned that my work is quite chaotic. Like, I 100% agree with you. Even speaking to you in this interview, like going from one sentence to another, getting tongue twisted, and just the way I talk, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
Like the way I create work, it's just like, oh right, so this is me. This is actually how I am. Not to say I don't know this, but
yeah,
I just find that quite interesting.
I think it adds so much character to your work, though. Just getting to speak to you, it kind of makes you look at your work and be like, yeah, I understand it now. I get it. I get why it's so like I get it why it's so chaotic and so confusing, and I get it why but I like it because it's like you have so much to say. This is the thing. Like, that's what's nice about it. And if you look at your work says a lot at once, and that's exactly what you're like. You say a lot at once.
Yeah.
And I like that. So the last question is, what are you currently working on, and where can people find more about you and your work?
Okay, so currently I'm working on, well, as you mentioned before, the whole clothing brand for Philip Ninjas. You can find that. What do I put the handle as well?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can find that on Instagram and TikTok for now, and maybe Facebook. On FUFU, FUFULIPNINJAS, so for Philip Ninjas, or www.forphilipninjas.com. And the Mr. Frivolous stuff, you can find that anywhere. You can go to www.mrfrivolous.com. Is that it? Yeah, www.mrfrivolous.com. Or just put Mr. Frivolous in Google. It should be the first thing that comes up. And Mr. Frivolous is spelled MrFrivolous. You can find me anywhere and everywhere. Yeah, I guess. I hope. But maybe not everywhere, but definitely on socials. You see what I mean?
That's absolutely perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Frivolous, for your time. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me up here.
That concludes my conversation with Mr. Frivolous. Thank you very much for listening. If you like this conversation and have any questions or comments about it, please send me an email at theflyingfruitbowl@gmail.com and get in touch via social media sites such as Instagram and Twitter. The Flying Fruit Bowl podcast can be found on a variety of sites such as Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Music. If you like the show, please consider rating, reviewing, sharing, or subscribing on any of those platforms to help us spread the word. Also, please check out theflyingfruitbowl.co.uk for daily art inspiration, and if you're a creative, please get in touch for a chance to be featured or interviewed. Additionally, we also have a Patreon page if you're interested in supporting the platform further. Tiers start from £1, and more information can be found over at patreon.com/theflyingfruitbowl. Also, if monthly donations are not your thing, we also have a PayPal for one-time donations. A link to our PayPal shall be in the show notes. Once again, thank you very much for listening today. Until next time, folks, please stay safe.